い全国大会目指して頑張ってみたいかあの若い頃の気持ちを取り戻せたら良いのにもしよろしければ行きましょうか願いが叶う街にその時間楽しい年に行くもしかして知ってるのやのととすがり出会うやなものって答えそうかもしれない知りて素晴らしいものそれは救いの神道だ我々の忘れないでこれは愛の告白願って忘れましょう成長の苦悩世界を愛になり風のアウハウと叫んで気合い入れよう願いの願うの今日の今日のベケーション今日
Hello and welcome to Japanimation Station's Kyoto Vacation, an anime podcast brought to you by the folks at the Weekly Stuff Podcast. I'm Sean Chapman.
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
And we are here to kick back, relax, and talk about some anime. This week on the show, we continue part 5 of our Kyoto Vacation with Kyoto Animation's Splendid Isolation by picking up where we left off with Love, Chuunibyo, and Other Delusions. So we covered season 1 of that 3 episodes ago. And now today we're talking about, first, we'll touch on the compilation movie of season 1, and then our main focus is season 2, Love, Chuunibyo, and Other Delusions Rin, or Love, Chuunibyo, and Other Delusions Heartthrob, depending on where you look up the title.
Indeed. So yeah, they made some other stuff in between that we covered. So we did Tamako Market, Tamako Love Story, Beyond the Boundary, whatever the hell the movie was called, doesn't really matter. Now we're back
here.
Something like that. But no one cares, because now we're talking about everyone's favorite show, Love, Chuunibyo, and Other Delusions, and I was so happy to come back to this show, Sean.
Yes, I have a little bit more mixed feelings, I think, on Season 2. I like it, but Season 2, I think, is notably lesser than Season 1. Like, it's got a lot of good moments, but I was mixed on it when I originally watched it back when it first aired. I like it more now, but I still have some of the same issues I think I had when I originally watched it. That being said, it's still a very good show. It's just Season 1 was great. This is not quite there, I think.
I think I directionally agree. It is not as transcendently great as season 1 was. I also did not expect nor need it to be, nor would I know how it could be, because I think it told the story of where the meat of that story was is in season 1. I like this season a lot, though. It was better than I was expecting, because I think I had kind of gleaned from your tepid kind of response from beforehand that you were not as hot on this season. And I agree it is not in that quite that same caliber. But one thing is, putting it right next to Beyond the Boundary, oh my god, this show is going back to the confidence of a Tatsuya Ishihara production. There was something about that is such a cleanse. His stuff is just so supremely confident, I think, in tone, in storytelling, in character work. And I think this show just has such a vibrant world. I think it knows its characters so well. It, I think, is so consistently funny. I think this season is even funnier than season 1, in part because it is more of a comedy. Season 1 kind of shifts into being a little more melodramatic. Season 2 is pretty firmly a comedy from beginning to end, with some slightly heavier stuff here and there. So I enjoyed that. Again, I think the character work, the voice acting, the animation is just stunning. I think directionally, the directorial work on these episodes is consistently pretty astounding. There's so much good stuff in here. And I liked the story it tells overall. I think I take that your position is maybe more what I've heard from other people about this season, but I actually was pleasantly surprised by where it takes things. I actually think it's interesting what it does with the characters in the world, and I'm excited to dig into it. I enjoyed it an awful lot.
Yeah, I think for me, it's that, it's going for a more complicated introspective story in terms of the fundamental main plot that goes through the full season. And I think it's got a good idea of what it wants that story to be, but I think it kind of, for me, it emotionally falls flat by the end. And it's like, I feel like I've seen other things that have tried to do this story, and some other shows around this time period, specifically shows like my teen romantic comedy Snafu, or Oregairu is what it's usually referred to, that has some similar kinds of themes, but is much, I think, more effective at actually exploring them. And I feel like season 2 of Love, Chuunibyo, and Other Delusions, partially because like the story it needs to go for with the nature of the fact that the two characters are already in a relationship by the beginning, I think the season needed to be more dramatically different if it really wanted to execute on that core fundamental plot idea. And so that big picture plot for me kind of falls flat, whereas the individual episodes for me are still incredibly strong. And I think that's like my overall take on the season.
I guess that's, yeah, because like I also have been talking to my brother Thomas, who watched the whole show when we started watching it, and he was very down on this season. But then when I would keep saying, but this episode was fucking great, and he'd go, no, that episode is great. And I go, but this episode is great. And he'd go, no. And it's like almost every episode is fucking great. Like there are so many bangers in here. Up to and including ones like we get an entire nap competition episode about Kumin Senpai. We have 2 Dekomori episodes, or 2 Dekomori / Nibutani episodes that are just fantastic. I will say a lot of this season actually reminded me of the early parts of Clannad After Story. When I say Clannad After Story, everyone thinks about death and sadness. But the first half of that show is mainly, okay, the plot has kind of started to resolve in its initial phase around our 2 main characters. So the beginning of After Story is a lot of good stuff with the side characters that is more episodic and comedic. And there's a lot of that in this season that I really liked, because I think the cast of this show is so rich. Like, even if the main plot falls flat, which for me it does not, I think it works. But even if it does for you, I think I just enjoy this season for, I think, a lot of the good stuff it does with the supporting cast, who absolutely deserve the extra spotlight.
Yeah, I think for me the thing with it is, if the main plot falls flat, like all the good individual episodic stories, they kind of fall away in your memory. Like, I didn't remember, honestly, most of this season. Compared to season 1, which most of season 1, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this part. Oh yeah, I remember this episode. This one, most of it, I was like, oh, this was an episode of this show. Like, oh, this was an episode of this show. And it wasn't until I got to the last couple of episodes where I'm like, this is what I remember season 2 of this show being, is episodes 9 to 12, basically. And most of everything before that, I just did not remember at all. Even though they're really good episodes on their own, I think it's because if the main story doesn't land, that stuff ends up retroactively feeling less effective than it does in the moment.
Well, I do like the main story, and I think you're wrong, and I'm going to sick the Wicked Lord Shingon on you.
Yes. I think we have a reverse Tomoko market on our hands, where Tomoko market, which again, neither of us think that, I don't think this is a bad show. You didn't think Tomoko market was a bad show, but right. We were flipped on how good it is and where it is on that spectrum.
Indeed. So there we go. But let's talk about it, because there is a lot to dig into in this episode of Japanimation Station.
Yes. So first, we do need to talk about the compilation movie. I keep on wanting to call it a recap movie because it's more of a recap movie than it is a compilation movie.
Yes, it is.
But technically, compilation movie is what we refer to these things. So let's go through some of the history and then pick up on that movie. So there's not a huge amount of history here because it was a production. They're just sort of picking up the productions. But so they completed season 1 of Chuunibyo. And then the second season of the show was being considered as the first season wrapped up, because remember, season 1 of Chuunibyo was a pretty big hit. Not free level, not like Haruhi level, but bigger than most of the other stuff we've talked about recently. Basically, it's the biggest hit post-K-On! Until they do free. So they were already floating the idea of doing a sequel, but then some of the producers of the show proposed to the director Ishihara that maybe they should make a movie that would then bridge the production of the 2 seasons of the TV show. So basically fit that right in the middle, where you have 2012 for season 1, 2013 for the movie, 2014 for season 2. So Ishihara decided that he didn't want to just make a normal standard compilation film, meaning not one that's just telling the story of season 1. He wanted to do something that bridged the gap between the 2 seasons. So that's where you get a thing that is basically the first section of the movie is all original footage, or animation that is more just kind of a big fancy, hey, we're in a movie theater kind of opening. But then there's a big sequence at the end that is more setting up season 2. In fact, season 2 has a lot of stuff in the first episode that is just flashing back to things that happened at the end of the movie, in case people did not see the movie. There were a couple other notable changes, the biggest one being that the movie has a completely redone soundtrack, still by Nijine, the same composer, but is like a theatrical soundtrack composed specifically for that movie that runs the length of that movie. And it's honestly probably like, other than for seeing the new beats of story, that's probably for me was the main takeaway, was I liked the soundtrack, and that's kind of what stood out to me. The movie had a small-scale release, as you would expect. It was released on September 14th, 2013, in a small number of theaters, and it grossed a total of 223 million yen. I double-checked that number a few times to make sure I wasn't missing a zero somewhere. It is definitely 223 million yen. So it's generally in the same like category as Tamako Love Story Beyond the Boundary. It's a little bit more than those two movies, though it also predates those two movies. The movie did also start with a Chuunibyo short called My Older Brother 2, which once again, I'm frustrated that on the home release version, they don't just put that at the beginning of the movie, because you have to go, if you want the proper experience, you have to go to the special features, watch My Older Brother 2, then go watch the movie.
Oh, is it on the Blu-ray? I must have missed it.
Yes.
I didn't see it there. Okay, well, yeah, then they should have put it there. What the fuck? I missed a Chuunibyo short. I'm mad.
If I remember correctly, I think that's the one where he ends up in the cast, which is also important to the season 2, because the cast is what they find. So I'm pretty sure that's where that happened, was in My Older Brother 2. Because then you get in the full light shorts season for season 2, they also give you My Older Brother 3. So you have your trilogy of My Older Brothers.
That. Yeah.
Yes.
That sucks. They should have just put it with the other light shorts with season 2. They could have done it that way also.
Because that's also where the first time you see the incredibly bonkers ending animation that they made for season 2 of the light shorts. It's on My Older Brother 2 also. It's just fucking insane. And the idea that everyone sat down to watch that movie, and then like in about 3 minutes they are watching hula dancing Rikka is pretty crazy.
It is the best opening or ending we have this season. It is so fucking good. I love it so much.
Yeah. So, and honestly, that's where my notes on the movie end. I've got a couple of things on season 2, but let's just talk about the movie, because I don't think there's a huge amount to say here. So the staff, obviously, it's all basically the same people from the TV show. It's directed by Ishihara Tatsuya. It's written by Hanada Juki. The character design is Ikeda Kazumi. Composer is Nijine, which again, they did a whole new soundtrack for the movie. The storyboards are just credited Ishihara Tatsuya, although obviously the fact that there's a lot of footage from the TV show in the middle 50 minutes of the movie, there's storyboards from everybody, basically. One notable credit here, and this will come up again in the TV show, is you've got Yukimura Ai is credited as the assistant director, which I assume that is likely mostly for the beginning and ending of the film. And so this is the first time I think we've seen her name. So Yukimura, she got her start in anime as an assistant director on some shows like The Ambition of Oda Nobunaga, which is the story of Oda Nobunaga, but what if Oda Nobunaga was a lady? Stop me if you've heard this one. What if anime gender-flipped historical figures? And then she also worked on season 2 of Chihai Yafuru, which is a great sports anime about karate. So then she started working with KyoAni in 2013, and her first role at KyoAni was assistant director on this film. So she had plenty of experience working in anime before KyoAni, but the first thing once she came in here was assistant director on this. She then directs 2 episodes of season 2, and then works on various series and movies at KyoAni until 2017. One thing that jumped out to me is a few of her credits after leaving KyoAni. She was an assistant director on the Super Peacebusters movie Her Blue Sky, which whenever we do our Marty Okada season, which will definitely happen at some point, we'll watch that movie, and so she worked on that. And then she also, along with a lot of people who left KyoAni in the 2010s, ended up working with Yamada Naoko on her Heike Monogatari series that she did at Science Saru, which is the thing that Yamada Naoko works on after she leaves KyoAni. And she was an episode director and storyboarder for that show. So there's an interesting name. It's the first time we've encountered her on our podcast.
Indeed. And yeah, I think the Rikka version movie, I think it would be safe to say, is definitely an above-average compilation film. It is, because it has a solid, episode's worth of new material. It's got, 15 minutes at the end, about 10 minutes or 15 minutes at the beginning, about 10 minutes at the end. So, a solid 25 minutes of new material. It's got a new theme song. I think the beginning portion is just incredibly funny. I think if you were in the movie theater with a bunch of fans watching that when it came out, it would be very fun as a reintroduction to the world of Chuunibyo. The absolutely ridiculous dream sequence that is effectively a Nichijou short, because it is this crazy dream that gets crazier and crazier and crazier, and then ends with Rikka waking up, which is a joke they do with the entire like Sky Kingdom thing in Nichijou several times, and I enjoyed that. And then the ending is a nice preview of what's to come in season 2 and has some really sweet scenes. And then in the middle, it is, your kind of standard recap fare. It is definitely not for the uninitiated. This is not a Yoshiyuki Tomino Mobile Suit Gundam recap movie where you could show it to someone who hadn't seen the show and they would still enjoy it. I think it is always, always, always worth remembering with these movies that the point is not to like replace or improve the TV experience and like be like, now that we've made this, you can forget the 12 episodes of the TV show and just watch the Rikka version. No one has ever said that. It is designed to be a fun thing in a movie theater where you get to see some of the cool animation from season 1 on the big screen in kind of a compressed package and enjoy those moments. And then there's also some new stuff in here, which is really good. The animation at the beginning of this is very, very movie quality. It's got some of the most elaborate CG, like background shots they've done so far at Kyoto Animation. So that's kind of cool. I will say, I think the best thing about it, I do think the score is beautiful. And I actually think that's one thing I will say about this season. Like, firmly, I do think season 2 has the better soundtrack. Like, I think Nijine really grows as a composer. And I think season 2, like, there's parts of it that really remind me of the key soundtracks from, like, Air, Clannad, Kanon. And in a good way. They're really beautiful tracks. And I think the way they do it for the movie is she scores it to be very, like, nostalgic, like we're watching memories. And I think that's really effective in terms of tying the material together. So does that make this entire 90-minute thing like an absolutely essential viewing? No, but I would still watch it if for nothing else then the beginning and end are really good. And if you really can't stand watching recap material, the fast forward button is there for you. So there you go.
Yes, I will say, as someone who does not like this as like a viewing experience, I always skip recap episodes if it's in an anime. I do not typically seek out the compilation movies because my eyes just kind of glaze over when I get the contextless version of the story. I got a lot of progress in the current Fate Grand Order event done while watching the middle section of this movie, because it is, it's just the kind of thing where like there's no story really being conveyed to you in that middle 50 minutes because it's so out of context. Like the notion of Rikka's dad being dead is not introduced to you if you're just looking at the footage in front of you until the moment when they're on the beach from the end of episode 12.
Yes. And
she looks across she looks beyond the boundary, before beyond the boundary even. She looks beyond the boundary and says goodbye to her father. It is that thing where it's like, and it's just not for me. Like, I think I had been sold on the idea that this movie was a little bit more like, it's like this way that people refer to it, and it's the way it was kind of like broadly pitched this is season 1, but from Rikka's perspective, that's not what it is at all. No. I don't know why it's called Takanashi Rikka version. I have no idea why that's the title of the movie, which is just basically what it's called in Japanese as well as Takanashi Rikka Kai, Love Chuunibyo, or Chuunibyo Demokoi ga Shitai. And it's like, that would have been very interesting to me. Obviously, it would also require you to do a huge amount of new footage to actually be able to try to tell that. So I would, if people have not seen it, I'd recommend just watching the beginning and the end. If you want to like get the sort of recap experience, you can watch the middle section, but there's no new material buried within the middle section. So there's no, like, if you want to just see the new stuff, there's nothing worried about skipping over that part.
Other than the soundtrack is lovely, but if there is a soundtrack release, I'm actually not sure if the movie had its own. Probably that music is out there somewhere. It is lovely on its own. And again, sometimes I think people in America, because we don't get most of these recap movies. It's actually pretty rare that you have like these Sentai Filmworks sets for the KyoAni shows, just include them all. That's honestly pretty rare. And it's nice to have them for completion's sake. They are often not distributed here. And I think sometimes when people see them, they get weirded out by what it is. And I think, like the context you gave at the beginning, this was in a small number of theaters for a small period of time as just a little fun kind of thing in the middle. Is it also a way to wring out a little extra money from existing material? Sure. But there's more dishonest ways to do that. No one is telling you this is 90 minutes of all new animation. So
yes, yeah. I don't begrudge the existence of the movie. The thing I don't like is like when people will like hype these movies up. It's like, you gotta see the movie, and I'm like, no, you don't. Like, it's nice, it's nice to get the new stuff, but it is not.
Yes.
I feel I have been duped many times with people trying to say that like this adds something really important to like the overall franchise. It's like it really
very
doesn't.
rarely
Like,
does. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like Mobile Suit Gundam is like the very rare exception, where that's like the thing I think in my ideal world of what I would like to watch is something more like that gives you a like complete version of the story just packaged in a different way with that, because of the way that it's been edited and stuff, gives you a different like lens or window into that narrative, because I want the narrative to be explored in some way, less the just like I'm here to sort of look at contextless animation, because I can just go to Sakagaboru and look at the GIFs for that.
But, like, again, I think the Mobile Suit Gundam thing almost skews the whole history of this, because it is an early example of the compilation film, and it is just in the level of, like, effort that went into it on a completely different scale than 99.9% repeating of all compilation movies ever made. 70% of that third movie is reanimated. It's heavily edited. Yoshiyuki Tomino is one of the most talented editors in anime history. Like, it's just a different thing, and most compilation movies are just kind of a stop on the otaku media cycle. I would say this is above average because of the amount of new content, because of that soundtrack, but that does not mean it is transcendent, but still, there's good stuff in there.
Yes, I would just definitely, like, of the two we have, like, sort of covered. We didn't, like, really cover the compilation movie for Beyond the Boundary, but I skimmed through it. Compared to that, like, this is definitely
way better.
Advisable. Like, that one is like, if you want to watch the last 2 episodes of Beyond the Boundary and then like a bunch of random stuff before that, then you could watch that compilation movie. But that movie's just the last 2 episodes, basically. This at least has that sort of like the beginning and the ending. You get the fun, like, we get like, a big cool movie surround sound mix in the opening 15 minutes and this big crazy dream sequence and the new music. Like, all that stuff is fun. So it definitely is like, above average for this sort of thing.
Absolutely. All right. You want to talk about the TV show?
Yes. So then the TV show. So just a couple of little notes on the TV show. So they began production on season 2 of the show, while they're doing the movie, and that incorporated elements from the second light novel, right? So remember that technically this all goes back to a series of light novels that KyoAni published. The first season is loosely based on the first light novel. This one is very, very, very loosely based on the second one, because as far as I can tell, the only thing really pulled from the second light novel is just Shichimiya Satone, or Sophia, the big new character, the Maho Mao Shoujo, or magical devil girl. And especially just like they have taken her design in the fundamental premise that she is this girl from middle school that kind of served as the inspiration for Yuta to become a Chuunibyo, and then they drift apart, and Satone ends up at the middle school where Mori Summer is at, and then later after Yuta and Rikka are in a relationship, she shows back up again. Like, that basic idea is what's in the light novel. Everything else is obviously like very different, because remember, you don't even have characters like Dekomori or Kumin or Toka, the sister. Like, none of those characters are in the light novels at this point, so most of the season is brand new stuff. The big thing I noticed in the light novel of like the kind of the story the light novel tells, and this is just me reading from a synopsis, so I can't fill in all the details of it, but what the synopsis reads is that Satone in the light novel, quote unquote, kidnaps Rika. Like, I don't imagine that that's like has her at gunpoint or anything crazy like that, but in a Chuunibyo sense, kidnaps her, and then Yuta, with Nibutani's help, because Nibutani knows her from middle school, track down where Satone and Rika are. That's where Satone confesses that she used to like Yuta and still likes him, and he tells her that he can't be with her because he's in love with Rika, basically, which is a little bit more of a kind of standard plot. The season 2 of Love, Chuunibyo, and Other Delusions as an anime kind of goes for a more complicated, more introspective version of that plot, which we'll talk about. But
which I think, whatever you think about it, I think that is, just reading that about the light novel, I think the anime made the right choice. That's what I was worried this season would be when I saw Satone, and I'm so glad it is not that version of it, I will say. But,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they make season 2. It's called Love, Chuunibyo, and Other Delusions Ren in English, or sometimes it's translated as Heart Throb in Japanese. That Ren is just a kanji that means love, basically. And so it airs one core from January to March 2014. Season 2 sold well, but it was not like the big hit like season 1 was. So it sold about 7,000 copies per volume, which is about half of what the season 1 volumes did. So it's better than Tamako Market or Beyond the Boundary in terms of performance, but compared to season 1, it's a very notable drop.
Why do you think that confuses me a little bit? Because, like, they didn't do anything like The Endless Eight. Although now that I say that, I would love the Endless Eight version of Love, Chuunibyo, and Other Delusions. What the hell would that be? That'd be great. And like, whatever you think about it, it's not like they do something fucking crazy here and like the animation goes south or they ruin all the characters or something. I feel like if you enjoyed season 1, there's a ton of stuff you will inevitably enjoy in season 2. Maybe not. So that confuses me a little bit.
Well, I mean, in general, the critical reception for season 2 is that it's worse than season 1. Like, overall, like, my feelings on it are more in line with the mainstream. I think, I probably like season 2 more than what, like, the average opinion, both in Japan and over here. Which is, again, the average opinion is not that it's a bad show, it's that it is not as good as season 1, and it's kind of a disappointment in that context. I think the other thing is, by the time you get to 2014... like, that's not, that doesn't seem like a huge amount of time has passed, but by the time you get to 2014 is now we are, like, beginning the full shift to isekai anime, and the kind of, like, rom-com anime is becoming less of, like, sort of the big primary thing, right? Because in 2012, when season 1 comes out, that's in, like, the midst of rom-com animes are like the thing. They're like the thing from like 2009 to like 2012, 13 or so. They're like the dominant genre for a good chunk there. And like everybody's getting their harem romance light novel adapted and stuff like that. By the time you're getting to 2014, that is now shifting to Sword Art Online and that sort of thing. So I suspect that is one of the reasons why this is not performing as well. As just like the genre interest in the like kind of hardcore otaku space has started to move on from this kind of show.
That makes sense, because also like the next romance show that is kind of a big hit is Kaguya-sama, Love is War, which is a very different kind of thing. And then it has had its own series of like imitators and offshoots that have gone in a different direction. So that kind of makes sense to me. I can understand this being in more of a no man's land in that way. I think that is maybe a guiding theme in this part of our season that we're doing, is Kyoto Animation having a little more trouble finding what the finger on the pulse of what audiences want is. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're making bad stuff, although we weren't big fans of Beyond the Boundary. But I think that's true of like Tomoko Market too, commercially and stuff like that. Whereas like they were riding the very front of a wave in kind of Haruhi through K-On! And stuff like that. And then this feels like it's kind of the other side of it, of kind of like, and you can just feel it with the genre leaps that we've been making, and I know that we're going to make next week with Myriad Colors Phantom World, is trying to figure that out. And then eventually they'll be doing Free and Sound Euphonium, and they'll find that groove again. But it's interesting.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think that is part of the thing with the Splendid Isolation section of, like, that they were, like, a defining studio in basically from 2006 to 2011, 2012. Like, they are, like... KyoAni can do no wrong. Everything they do basically is massive hit. Even when it's not a massive hit like Nichijou, it's still like, it still gets this weird sort of cult success in this weird TV version and all that kind of shit that goes with it. And yeah, at this point, they have shifted to the strategy of one, they're now no longer as much in the market of looking for, let's try to adapt either something that is already popular, like Haruhi, even though an adaptation of that was a complicated thing. So even though the light novels were popular, it was no, sure thing that the anime would be popular as well. But also stuff like Lucky Star and K-On!, that wave was just beginning where that kind of manga was getting popular. And so they were like part of that whole thing. Whereas here, like they're not making Sword Art Online. They're not making whatever other kind of like early isekai shows that start to like begin that trend. They don't make a Konosuba or anything like that. And I don't think, I'm glad that they don't. Like, I wouldn't want them to. I'm glad that they've never gone to that genre, because I don't think, they could make a good show, whatever it is, but I don't think that genre is particularly suited to the things that these artists are really, really good at and have become masters at. And I do think, it is about kind of them feeling their way through and kind of getting a sense of where do we go, what do we adapt, what kind of shows do we make. Because Love, Chuunibyo and Other Delusions is, I think, a clear carry-on from a lot of their stuff from the 2000s, like Clannad. It's not the exact same kind of show, but it's moving on the same kinds of moe romance comedy trend that a lot of their stuff was doing. And I think you're just starting to see that show and this version of that kind of show not become as popular anymore.
Yes. And I think you feel like there is a certain thing in this season of just, there's a little bit of like home base comfort to a lot of this of like, there's a club, there's our Moe characters, there's all of that. And of course, their later day successes, your Sound Euphonium, Free, Tsurune, whatever they're going to be, those are more in the wheelhouse of their earlier kind of club comedy shows. I guess Violet Evergarden would be the big kind of outlier there when we get to that one, which I'm excited to see. But yeah, it's an interesting thread to pull on here. Anything else to say about this season?
So just like, run through the crew really quick. It's this, generally, again, it's like the same people, Ishihara Tatsuya, Hanada Juki, which I'm actually watching a romantic comedy anime right now that I noticed is also written by Hanada Juki, which is The Dangers in My Heart, which is very, very good if people want to check that out. That's a manga adaptation, so it's not like it's an original thing he did, but it's like, oh, hey, I recognize that name from my Kyoani stuff. That's cool. Character designs, once again, Ikeda Kazumi. Composer, again, is Nijine, which I 100% agree with you, Jonathan, that the music in the movie is awesome, which you expect because obviously you get a lot more time as a composer and get to make it like bespoke for the film. But also, I think that carries on for season 2. The music just gets better. In terms of episode directors, it's a lot of familiar faces, but we do have a couple of newer people mixed in here as well. So Ishihara Tatsuya directs the first episode, and he does the OVA. And then, interestingly, he does the storyboards for episode 2, which episode 2 is the first episode directed by Yukimura Ai, who, again, was that assistant director on the Rikka version movie. So this is that kind of classic, like, old-school KyoAni person does the storyboards, newcomer comes in and does the episode direction, and then they get a second episode later on, because Yukimura Ai then does the storyboards and the direction for episode 8, which is later in the show.
One small correction to your notes here. He also did do half the storyboards for episode 12 with Noriyuki Kitanohara. I noticed that in the credits, and it just doesn't say that here, but he did do a little bit there as well.
You are right. I did forget to add that to my notes. So yes, he did some of the storyboards for the finale, which you would expect. Then we have Kawanami Eisaku, who we've had around a lot. For a while now, he did episodes 3 and 9. Some of the storyboards for episode 9 were also done by Ishidate Taichi, who that's the only thing he worked on really for the show other than some animation.
That one has a particularly elaborate action scene where she has her mecha version of herself. That makes total sense that is what Taichi Ishidate came in and did. But I have to say, Kawanami Eisaku is becoming one of my favorites, where every time their name comes up, it's an episode I really love. I think 3 and 9 are both really good, so I'm loving to see that name come up more and more.
Yes, yeah, I feel like that's one where like a lot of his earlier episodes weren't like the big standouts. Although everyone's always doing good work, because obviously they're obviously supported by this incredibly good staff. But yeah, now like some of his episodes, like episode 9 in particular, is a real standout. That's the beach episode. Takimoto Yasuhiro, the man who never misses, always directs a great episode. Episodes 4 and 10, and kind of like first season, I feel like he gets that, because I think that was also episode 10, which is just like the juiciest episode. This is the one where that's like the Satone focused episode, and it's like, god damn, that is a man who's very good at what he does. That's a man who also really likes reflections, because that episode 10 opens with a shot of Yuta and Satone reflected in a puddle. I'm like, oh, this is a Takimoto episode, huh? And I looked it up and I was like, yeah, it is. Let's see, we have Ogawa Taichi directed episode 5, the napping episode. That one's interesting, though, because that also, the storyboards were done by Ogawa, Yamada Naoko, and Utsumi Hiroko. Like, I don't know what about that episode was like, we need the absolute, like, dream team here. We need the woman who's now making Free the biggest show we've got right now. We've got fucking Yamada Naoko, and then Ogawa Taichi, who's been around for a long time at this point, has been doing some good stuff. They're all to the nap episode. I don't know, but the nap episode is like probably tied with me for episode 10 as my favorite episode. The nap episode's just fucking amazing.
It's outstanding. It's not, and it's so funny because I was definitely bouncing between watching that one of going, this feels like Yamada Naoko, this feels like someone else, and then you get to the end, I'm like, oh, they just brought the fucking dream team out for this one. Okay, makes sense. That's got some incredible work in the way they do nap combat. It's outstanding.
Yes. We've got Kitanohara Noriyuki does 2 episodes here, episodes 6 and 12. Both of those are fantastic. Yamamoto Takia does episode 7. And then Fujita Haruka, who we talked about last time with Beyond the Boundary stuff, right? She is the one that I commented is like, seems like to be basically Ishidate Taichi's, kind of apprentice in a way, because she's the one who then becomes one of the co-directors basically for Evergarden and all that stuff. She does episode 11 here, which is also a very good episode. So I mean, all the episodes are good episodes. Again, my problem with the show has nothing to do with individual episodes being bad. It's more like the big picture story not coming together. But all the individual episodes, I think, work really well on their own merits.
Yeah. Do you also want to quickly go over the opening and ending and some of that stuff?
Yes. So we've got our opening theme is Voice by Zach, which Zach is our person for all the opening endings for everything in Love, Chuunibyo and Other Delusions. It was that case for season 1, be that case for the movie. I really like the opening. I particularly like there's the line right at the end where she just goes, Rikka voice,
Yes.
obviously like singing it out. But that line always makes me crack up when it comes up because it's such a goofy... It's a very goofy line that only works because it's being spoken in English in a Japanese song.
Yes.
But I smile every time she sang out Rikka voice in the very end of the song.
It's a good song. I didn't like it as much as the song from season 1, but that's a hard... It's kind of like season 1 itself. That's a pretty tall bar to climb, and I think it is the right song for this season. It's a very good opening. The animation is great. Did you see the stupid video I posted to Twitter of matching the animation of this to the opening from Dragon Ball Super? Because it works... It is just a fucking shonen anime opening. Like, there's the part in the middle where Satone comes in and is, like, doing these punches on Rikka, and that's where I got the idea, because that moment is in the Dragon Ball Super opening I pulled from, which was the opening for the Tournament of Power, and it's like, that's what made it work. It's such a fucking shonen anime opening. I love it.
Yeah, and I do particularly, I like the animations at the beginning where you've got all the girls are like on this magical circle that's rotating. Yes. And there's that one bit where like Rikka is like doing a hula hoop thing, but it's with the magic circle, which is very funny. And then I have in my notes, I had to put them in because I love them so much, the gifs of Kumin doing her dance in the opening, which is like, you could tell they kind of, I feel like Kumin is every animator on the show's favorite character. Because every time she shows up, they give her the best poses, the best shots, the best animation. Like, she's the character who just doesn't give a shit about anything, and it's the best. And I love the way that they animate her, particularly in season 2. So then we have the ending theme is Vanishment This World, which if you want to type it, you have to replace all the I's with exclamation marks because that's how it is in the proper Japanese version. So that's what you got to do, which is sung by all the main female actors under the group name Black Raisin Detra, but it is a Zach song, just sung by our voice actresses. This is another like very good song. I think, again, I probably prefer the ending from season 1, but this is still a very good one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But we've got to put all that aside, Sean, because the true song that defines this season is a hair-raising carnival dancing in the abyss, which is the song that is the ending to the shorts, which is possibly the best thing to come out of season 2 of this show, and I love season 2. That song, so it's sung by Uchida Maya, the voice actress who does Rikka. It has the craziest animation. It could easily be an ending to Nichijou or Lucky Star or something. It is so out there. It's got all these like phrases on screen. It's a killer song. I can't believe I can't believe they did that just for the shorts. That should have just been the ending for the season. It's so good.
Yeah, it is also insane. Like, it's like as when it happened, especially because, again, for me, the context was I watched the short for the movie.
Yes.
It's the end of the short for the movie, and then you go watch the movie. It's like, what? If you imagine like bringing your friend who didn't watch the anime to the movie theater or whatever, and to be like, what the fucking hell is happening? Because it's just stylistically so different than everything else, and there's something really surreal about seeing Chibi Rikka in like a hula dance get up. It's so bizarre, and the lyrics are just like fucking cocaine-addled nonsense. Like, it's just insane. Like, it is 100% Lucky Star or Nichijou levels of I have no idea what they're on here, but I'm way into it. Yes, and I love the title, A Hair-Raising Carnival Dancing in the Abyss, is phenomenal.
It is, I mean, actually the thing I would probably compare it to most is like the ending to Haruhi it is that kind of like dance song where you just find yourself singing along to it. The lyrics are so rhythmic. It's so silly. It's so well choreographed. I wonder if this season would have been more popular if that had been the end theme to the main season and people were doing like dance videos and reactions to it online.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is because it's on the shorts, like if you're, watching them after the fact, like we are, and you're just going through the Blu-rays, like you're just like mainlining this ending if you're actually watching it each time, because the shorts are like 4 or 5 minutes long, and you're going through and watching it every 5 minutes for six times in a row. You're just watching this like crazy song. You're like, And I couldn't skip it ever. I did it. I watched it all the way through every single time because I'm like, this is fucking amazing.
It is worth it. All right. Is that it for kind of our preamble? Should we dive into the show proper?
Yes, that's what I got for my preamble.
All right.
Japanimation Station.
Thanks for listening to Japanimation Station. If you're enjoying the show, please remember to like and subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and tell your friends.
You can support the show directly on Ko-fi at the link in the description, and remember to check out the Weekly Stuff podcast, our long-running series on movies and video games and everything else on all platforms.
And now, back to the show.
Well, then I think we should have it out here, Sean, and I think we should just... Because I think there's a lot of stuff in the season that we are going to have no disagreement on. Is the Kumi napping episode delightful and perfect? Yes. Are there a lot of phenomenal moments of comedy with Rikka and her insanity? Is Deko Mori as cute as ever? All of those things. Yes, 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 yes. But I think it sounds like where this comes down to is the main plot with Yuta and Rikka and probably Satone. So... I really liked it, but I will hand it over to you, and I will let you have it out, and then I will respond.
Yeah, so I think my, big picture issue with this season is it feels like they don't really know exactly what they want to do with Yuta and Rikka's relationship. Because it feels like they try out a couple different versions of what they want this to be. Because at the beginning, right, in episode 2, they set up this whole thing where they go on the date to the aquarium, and then afterwards you have this very nice scene of them sitting in this pagoda or whatever at sunset looking at a river, and that's where it kind of lays out the dynamics of the relationship as it seems to exist for season 2 at the beginning, which is all these other people like Nibutani are trying to pressure them to kiss and move on to what are kind of generic markers are for a romantic relationship between a couple, because at this point they've been together for 6 months or something for a high schooler for an incredibly long amount of time. I would be shocked and impressed if any of my freshmen were in a romantic relationship for 6 months. Most of them can't last 6 weeks. And so it seems like, they're progressing really slowly. And Yuta kind of has this thing with Rikka where he says, hey, it's not about that. It's about the time that we spend together, and it's we don't have to kiss, we don't have to do those things. Those are not the things we need to do to prove our affection for each other. We are bound by a contract that is different than them. We have our own contract, and we have our own terms of our relationship. And he sets that up in episode 2. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And then because I think there is something there of you do not have to have the same kind of romantic relationship, and those things, those pressures to have sex or to kiss or whatever, those are things that other people or society or expectations that society puts on you that are not actually the fundamental things in a relationship that are important. And then when you get all the way to the end of the show in episode 12, it kind of reiterates that, where you have a scene that is kind of the same scene again, only now they're being a little bit more physically affectionate. Rikka tries to initiate this kiss. When they're about to kiss, she starts crying, and then Yuta backs off and gives kind of the same speech again. Just now they have a flashback to some of the stuff that's happened in season 2, and saying that, hey, it's changed a little bit over time. We've grown a little bit over time. And then they kiss each other on the cheek. Then they go in for a kiss again, and then it gets interrupted by the phone call. And I'll say that my predominant memory of season 2, from having originally watched it 10 years ago now, in 2014, because this is now a 10-year-old show, which is fucking crazy for me to think about, and all of a sudden I feel incredibly old having thought about that and had that in my head, because it does not feel like the show is that old. But my predominant memory was feeling incredibly frustrated when that kiss gets interrupted by the phone call, because there's this weird doublethink going on, where the show is telling us it doesn't have to be these things. If we're not comfortable with these things, it does not have to be the kiss. It doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be that. At the same time, the show at multiple times goes to this space, because there's a very similar scene in episode 6 where they're both hiding under the covers during the school field trip. They're going to go in for the kiss. It gets interrupted by something else happening in your very sort of standard cliche love comedy kind of way. And there's just something about it that feels like you could have had the scene in episode 12, obviously with the exception of like Satane's presence and stuff like that. That could have been the first episode of season 2, and that could have been our starting point, because it doesn't feel like their relationship has actually meaningfully changed in any way from where it was at the end of season 1, especially when you get your sort of like, Yuta says, hey, like we've grown closer bit by bit over time. And I'm like, do they feel like they're more intimate and closer than they did at the end of season 1? Like, does it actually feel like the relationship has grown? Because in many ways, the relationship has become twisted into this weird Yuta is like her pseudo caregiver now because they're living together. And I don't think the show has ever really, the season 2 ever really kind of grappled with how that dynamic changes their relationship fundamentally. And it kind of feels like some episodes they're kind of romantic, some episodes he is like she is like his surrogate daughter in this weird way with how their relationship dynamic works out. And I just feel like I wish the show kind of committed more specifically to what exactly do we want this relationship to be, and how do we want it to resolve, or like how do we want it to progress given the dynamics of these characters. And because also so much of the season, about half of the season, is dedicated to episodes that Yuta and Rika are very much in the background, it doesn't feel like they have actually spent that much time. And that message of it's that little bit of time, bit by bit, over the course of the season, that's the thing that really matters. That's where our relationship has evolved. That's where we've grown more intimate, come to understood each other. Like, I don't actually emotionally feel that, because the focus for season 2 is on the other characters for most of it, because I think, like, when you have what episode 2 sets out their relationship to be, there's not a lot of stuff to do in the other episodes with their relationship. So that's kind of a little bit rambling, but that's kind of a lot of the different individual elements that made me feel frustrated with the story for season 2.
So I understand where you're coming from, and I agree with parts of that. Like, I do think probably in terms of their relationship, the biggest, and I think it's honestly a potential, like, really interesting well of material to pull on that they don't pull on, is the living together dynamic. And
yes,
some of what that leads to. I think it is something that is done because it leads in the early going to some fantastic comedy, and it does. Like that first episode where they are all, which is the only one Ichihara Tatsuya, directs in the entire show, because he didn't direct in season 1, although he storyboarded, is such a great comedy episode about them living together and trying to hide it from everyone until Toka shows up. Fantastic. And so I understand why you do that from a comedy perspective. By the end of the season, there, I think, did need to be more of a reckoning of, but this is not the dynamic either of them need as romantic partners, and that would have been interesting to explore, and the show kind of doesn't do that. With the other stuff, though, I will say, like, the frustration you're feeling, I don't think it can be ignored that the show, and this doesn't necessarily make your frustration wrong, and I'm not trying to deny that. I think the show is 100% aware of that frustration. I think one of the funniest things they do is when their kiss is interrupted again, you have all the other characters coming in and complaining about it, and that's the final scene there is them all berating Yuta and Rika for not kissing yet, and like that is something that I think is so pervasively on the show's mind this season, is the gap between sort of expectations of where the romance goes after an ending like season 1 that feels like this very kind of fairy tale perfect kind of consummation moment, and then saying, but there is much, much, much more complexity to that to explore, and I think it is aware of that gap. And I find what it does with that interesting. I think it is not as good, and I'm not saying that, as Tamako Love Story. I think it is of a piece with that show in interesting, or of that movie in interesting ways, in being about, I think, sides of the love story process that are not usually done in things that call themselves love stories. Like Tamako Love Story is actually a weird thing to call a love story, because it is mostly about two people siloed in their own brains, trying to figure out their own shit enough that they can confess to each other and be vulnerable. And I think this season does some similar things, not about a confession, but about what comes after the confession, and about being a shy teenager, being, in Rika's case, a pretty clearly neurodivergent teenager, which I say with love. I am too. And like trying to deal with the vulnerability that comes from both the kind of movement towards physical intimacy, but also like being comfortable in your own skin if that's not what your relationship is founded upon or you're not ready for yet, or things like that. And I think it does some of that material really beautifully. I was expecting to find the Satone side of the story more frustrating. I was worried they were going to do a love triangle thing. They really don't. I would not call this, there are 3 characters. It's not really a love triangle because there isn't a one, Yuta is not tempted by Satone. That's never a thing that happens in this show. And the competition aspect is just inherently very different. This is not Twilight where you have, Bella going between her sexy werewolf boyfriend and her sexy vampire boyfriend and trying to figure out which is the sexier boyfriend. That's not really the story they're telling here. And instead, it is much more for Rikka, who is more of the main character here than she was in season 1, or at least more of our point of view for a lot of this, about her feeling jealousy for the first time and learning what that is like and kind of where those priorities lie. And I like a lot of that. It felt like a more mature, interesting version of the another person kind of comes into the fray story than I've seen before, where no one is acting particularly petty or selfish about it. And even when you move in the final episodes to Satone owning up to the fact that she has feelings for Yuta, they don't do something stupid like apparently the light novels do, where she kidnaps Rikka and Yuta has to go save her. I really like that by the end of the season and in the OVA that Satone and Rikka have become really good friends, because they should be friends. They're very similar people in some of those ways. So I am probably being rambly too in my defenses of the show, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, because I agree with what the story is trying to do. I think it's just for us, it's how different is the execution come across. And I think it can't really, for me, be overstated how much of a miss the idea that they go in for the kiss and then the call interrupts it is for that last scene. Because it so feels like that is a trope that comes out of your classic romantic comedies your Ranma One Halves and Urusei Yatsura and stuff like that, where it's these are 2 characters that are obviously romantically interested in each other, but we have this manga is going to run for 15 years, or this TV show is going to have 500 episodes. They cannot really be in a relationship, but we want to keep on pumping up the romantic tension, and so we're going to keep on creating these scenarios where they almost kiss and then something interrupts it and they don't. And I think using that trope for this relationship, where you are trying to say that the nature of the relationship between Yuta and Rikka is not like those relationships you have seen in other romantic comedy anime, that is not meant to replicate your sort of generic idea of what a relationship is between 2 young people, because, as you say, Rikka is neurodivergent. And it's and the way that she perceives the world and the way she understands her relationship with Yuta is fundamentally different. And Yuta is trying to be understanding and accommodating of that fact. But when you then lean into the most classic romantic comedy anime trope, this side of girl running with the bread in her mouth and crossing the corner and running into the boy who's going to be the love of her life. This is the most classic cliche. It kind of ruins all that, because it then makes it feel is that even the story that you're really trying to tell, if this is what you do at the end? Because it would have felt so much more effective if they kissed each other on the cheek and looked at each other lovingly and left it there. They don't need to go in for the kiss, because if they're trying to go in for the kiss and they feel that pull, well, then that is the relationship it feels like they want to have. And the fact that they do it twice, the fact they do it at the midpoint of the show in episode 6, and then they do it again in episode 12, and they're the same scene with the same conclusion, it just ends up making it feel like I'm not confident that they fully know what they exactly wanted this relationship to be. Because it's also the kind of repetitive nature of you get such a similar speech from Yuta at the end of episode 12 as what you do at the end of episode 2. And the fact that then that there's no clear dramatic marker that the relationship has evolved in any way. That's part of the thing of redoing that trope with the kiss, the effect that has for me. And then there's no, and I don't want to say, I'm not saying this to say that there needs to be a big kind of dramatic, wedge in their relationship at some point in the season for it to be a good show. But there is something that is frustrating about the lack of a drama in their relationship by the fact that there is no clear difference between the beginning and the ending point of where we arrive at. That makes it feel like you're like, what story were we trying to tell between these two characters when there's nothing that feels dramatically different compared to season 1, where the characters start and where the characters end, there's such a clear difference and there's so much growth and evolution. That's a lot easier for season 1 because the characters hadn't met yet, so it's like season 2 has a big challenge in front of it to try to answer that question. But I just feel like it doesn't give a particularly satisfying way for us to explore whatever issues they're trying to explore, because I feel like they don't fully settle on exactly what dynamic do they want to explore between these two characters.
Yeah. I will agree 100% that it is, muddled to a certain extent, and certainly more muddled than season 1. Again, season 1 is such a crazy high bar, and I think also an interesting challenge in that it's not a season that clearly lends itself to a sequel. That first season is so close-ended. I think it's, the only reason they would even contemplate making a second season, I think, is probably because it was a hit, right? I mean, it does not feel like there's any unfinished artistic business there, other than maybe having more fun with the characters in the world, which I think on that level this season does with aplomb. So I'll agree that it's a little more muddled. I don't know. Throughout, I did find a lot of, particularly with Rikka, a lot of the emotional moments really evocative. Because they do have her in a slightly different mode in this season. She is not just, like, she has her eye patch on again. She is not just the Rikka we knew at the beginning of season 1. Like, they are doing more of clearly what Yuta ultimately came to see in her at that like midway point when they go visit the house that she used to live in, and he says to Toka that like this isn't just escaping reality, this is dealing with it. And there's a lot more of that this season where and we saw this a little bit in the OVA of season 1, which is the thing set after the end of episode 12 of season 1, where she is doing her Chuunibyo shit, but in a way that is more clearly engaging with the world around her and using it as like metaphors that people understand. And I think some of that stuff and seeing like where that breaks down for her, where it is something she pulls strength from, I think all of just Maya Uchida's performance I find so touching. I do just find a lot of that material interesting on that level of the kind of what's next element of the story of going from the confession to actually figuring out what a relationship looks like. I think it's probably true there could be more markers of difference, and I actually think you are right I think if the final scene ended, they kiss each other on the cheek, and they're looking at each other, and then the phone call, because it's still fun to have the phone call, and they go to find the kittens. That's a nice little ending.
Sure.
I think interrupting the kiss, I understand that as a point, because that is a much more, as you say, Ranma 1/2 style, episodic, sort of formulaic romantic comedy. Not to put that down, Ranma 1/2 is brilliant, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's just a different kind of show.
It's a different kind of show, yeah. I think sometimes people hear formulaic and they think that's a bad thing. It doesn't have to be. Nichijou, in its own way, was formulaic in the weird different skits it had, so we don't dislike that. But anyway, yeah, so I think that probably would have been a more powerful consummation in terms of kind of them coming to understand what it is. But I don't know, I just, maybe in part in a kind of journey, not the destination way, I found so much of it along the way really touching and interesting, particularly where Rikka is concerned as a character, that it did work for me really well.
Yeah. I think I found myself watching this season. This is partially because I had already seen it before, so I kind of knew broadly what I was in for. My mind kept on wandering to K-On! Season 2, or K-On! With 2 exclamation points to say it properly. Where I think like K-On! Like sort of solved part of this problem where like season 1 of K-On! So completely told the story it needs to tell. Because, people say that K-On! Is a show with no plot, and they're incredibly wrong. We went over that with that podcast. But season 1 of K-On! Told the story of Yui joining the K-On! Club and her, like, the ending of that first season where she says, like, this is what I sort of gained by joining this club and doing all these things, and look at, like, how enriched my life has been. You don't need anything more after that ending. And then with K-On! Season 2, I think the brilliance of what Yamada Naoka and that team did was they said, okay, well, let's make this a different kind of show, right? And we talked about that with season 2 of K-On! That it doubles the episode count. It becomes much more episodic and more formulaic in that way. It gets closer to the Ranma 1/2 of the world in the formulaic construction. It adds Azusa as effectively a co-protagonist that has full episodes that are just her POV, that basically don't have the old cast in it at all, or very sparingly. And by making that really dramatic shift, I think that's why KO in season 2 is able to be so special, because I think it identifies that it can't do the kind of show the first season did, really. It needs to find a very different territory, a different kind of format almost to exist in. And I kind of feel like that's really what Love, Chuunibyo and Other Delusions season 2 needed to be, because that's kind of what happens with this season, is it becomes much more comedic. It becomes much more sort of like aimless in a sense, because it doesn't have this really clear spine of, we're uncovering the nature of Rikka's past and her, like, why is she a Chuunibyo? Where has this come from? How do we help her? That gives such a clear vision of a story and a spine for season 1. That's not here for season 2. And yet it has the same general season structure of season 1, with like a couple of notable differences. Like, I think it was smart to have episode 12, even if I have some issues with exactly how it executes it, having episode 12 be an epilogue episode, that the main plot action with Satane has been resolved, and then you come to episode 12. Like, there's some smart choices they make. But generally speaking, if you look at what the episodes for season 1 were and what the episodes for season 2 are, there's a lot of similarities in the, okay, we're going to have Kumin episode, we're going to have our Dekamori episode, we're going to have our Nibitani episode, we're going to have like these one-offs, and then we're going to come together, we're going to have a two-parter in the middle that starts to reshift the stakes into something that's a bit more dramatic. It's less dramatic in season 2, but still a shift to drama. We're going to give Takimoto Yasuhiro episode 10 and just let him do a lot of cool stuff with puddles and rain, and make that like a real, like, pulling at your heart kind of episode. And then the big difference is what episode 11 and episode 12 feel a bit different, with episode 11 of season 2 being much more similar to the finale of season 1, down to some specific callbacks like Rikka being gone and Yuta chasing after her and having to shout Rikka in a way that, like, I think is meant to echo what the ending of season 1 was, and some of that kind of stuff. But I think by replicating a lot of the general structure of season 1 and the kind of show that season 1 was, for something that is just at its core trying to tell a different sort of story about relationships, I think that the structure of the season doesn't really support the story they're trying to tell. And I think that's one of the places where my frustrations come from when you do the, like, fake out kiss at the end. Feels like it's from a different kind of show than some of the other stuff you do in these episodes. And that's where I think I get that sense of, it's like not fully clear on exactly what it wants this relation to be, exactly how it wants it to develop. I think that's also goes down to the structure of the show doesn't feel suited actually for the thing they're trying to do with it.
I did not have that problem. I understand what you're saying, and I hadn't even really thought about that way, that it has kind of sharing that structure, because it felt fairly different to me throughout. So I understand what you're saying. That was not an issue I had with it. I think if I were making a suggestion or a complaint about this season, I think I like the Satane character, and I do, like, genuinely appreciate the restraint they have in not going to the sort of love triangle well with some of the things that I think could really break the season if they did it that way. I do think that character feels somewhat vestigial, in the sense that I don't think she is, like, fully kind of fleshed out as a character. And I do think with what you're saying, I do wonder if there's a different version of this season that is more from Satane's perspective, and then it kind of doesn't matter that Rikka and Yuta are not changing all of that much from your perspective, at least, because it would be more about someone else dealing with watching a friend become a lover to someone else instead of them. I wonder if there's something like that could have been done this season, that would have been a different kind of structure, where it's kind of an anti-romance, where they don't get together at the end, and that's what it's about. Because that's kind of what episodes 9, 10, 11 do, and I think they do it very well, particularly in the Takimoto Yasuhiro one. I don't know how you can watch the, like, last scene of that one and not be moved. It's beautiful.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like, I think that's part of it, is that, like, there are these things where, because the first half of the show is so dominated by one-off comedy episodes, And the second half of the show is so dominated by Satane-focused episodes. And it's only like really the first 2 episodes, the middle 2-parter, and then the last episode, episode 12. Those are the only ones that really feel like you're kind of zooming in on Yuta and Rikka. And so it just feels like there's not enough time, especially when episode 12 tells you it's about the little moments of time. And I think, and that's like where I really had this thought of like thinking to KO in season 2 and being like, well, that's exactly the thing that KO in season 2 did. Like, that's the insight it had, was if we're going to end with them graduating and Azusa having to see off these characters, we need to spend time, not like, you know, for the first season of KO in season 1 covers 2 full school years. KO in season 2 is twice the number of episodes for 1 school year. And I think there's something kind of similar here of like, if this is what you want to do and you're talking about the thing that's important in their relationship is these small moments of time they spend together. When I think about the moments with Yuta and Rikka, I'm thinking more about all their stuff in season 1 than I am their stuff in season 2, because they just don't feel like a focus of season 2 that much. And so there's something about that thing that Yuta tells us falls a little bit flat, whereas if you had a different seasonal structure or something, you did something else to really make it feel like, oh, we have spent so much time with these people and we've really like sort of luxuriated in this relationship in that more formulaic way, that would make that ending feel more impactful for me.
I can understand that. I think, but this is where like I feel like we've marginalized or put off to the side the fact that this show is so funny and light on its feet and individual episodes are so good. And I just don't want to. Like, that is the show to me. Like, that is the strength. Like, I could watch 100 more episodes of this show. It is like, this is just a show that for me, like, I breeze through. I love it so much. I love the rhythms of it. I think it is so confident, scene to scene, directorially, in terms of the pace of episodes. Like, is this season better on the episodic level than the seasonal structure level? Absolutely. That is 100% true. I will concede that easily. What I will not concede is that those individual episodes are so fucking good. Like, they are, like, it is, to me, is kind of banger after banger after banger in terms of episodes I really, really enjoy. Like, because I knew that people had kind of a lesser experience with this season, I was sort of waiting for the shoe to drop, and I was like, man, I loved that first episode. Man, that second episode was really sweet with their date that they go on, and they actually go to the Kyoto Aquarium. I've been to the aquarium they go to. It's kind of funny how realistically drawn it is, which the Kyoto Aquarium is probably very close to the animators at Kyoto
Yes.
Animation, so they could probably go check it out on a day trip. But anyway, they do that. You know, episode 3, where we first meet Satone, that's a Kawanami Eisaku episode, has some of the funniest character animation I have ever seen in it. You know, episode 4 is a Takamoto Yasuhiro one, which is the student council episode, which is our first big Nibutani Dekumori episode, and it just slays. Episode 5 is the nap competition episode. Episode 6 is our first Kitano Harunoriyuki episode, and that's where we start the school field trip. That one and the following one, which is Yamamura Takia, have some incredibly like vivid character animation and work on that level. And so it's just like over and over again, like it has the KyoAni touch so completely, but with, I think, the characters of this world, its unique sense of humor, the big crazy action battle sequences, which I just love how kind of free they are. It's not that the battle sequences in Beyond the Boundary are bad. They're done very well, but they are so limited by the weight of a show where I don't care about the characters or the stakes. And this is so imaginative and out there that I really find myself laughing at it and enjoying it. And so the basic experience of watching this show to me is so unbelievably pleasurable that I guess that's where the bulk of my response comes to it. More than, I guess, breaking down some of the seasonal structure, which again, I think is messier than season 1. More of it worked for me than I think it did for you. We talked about season 1. I think season 1 has one of the most miraculous structures I've ever seen, where the comedy gives way to like basically the plot of a key story without the little girl dying. And it's just incredible. But, I still like the confidence of this one. It is a fucking Ishihara Tatsuya show through and through.
Yeah, I think part of it is that because it is season 2, right? Like, it's inevitable that it's going to be compared to season 1 because it's part of the same show. And it's like when season 1 has that really powerful turn in the middle with that 2-parter, that then the back half of the show makes that shift to something that's much more dramatic. I do think it is kind of hard. It was definitely really hard for me the first time watching it. Like, I remember that of just being like, oh, like we go back to the mode from earlier season 1, but we also never find like another dramatic space to exist in. And I think it's like kind of like a hard shift. It's almost like when you're in music and you shift keys and you usually go up a key because that makes like that lifts up the energy of the song. You don't often go down a key in a song because it's like you're going backwards, like you're like the energy is getting sapped a little bit. And I do think that is part of the effect of watching season 2. And again, I felt that much more pronounced the first time I saw it. That didn't bother me as much this time, but it's just something I remember thinking, and then getting to the end of season 2 and just feeling frustrated that it felt like, where is all that stuff I had from season 1? Like, where is like something that sort of one-ups or moves that forward more? And that is definitely like, I think the thing that when you see like people having really negative reactions to the show online, I think that is where that comes from. Now, putting that aside, I will 100% agree with you that individual episodes are phenomenal. And really my favorite parts of the show are kind of a lot of the one-off episodes, like episode 5 in particular, where it is getting to focus on like the comedy and just sitting with the characters and just doing that stuff. Like, it's as good as anything else KyoAni has done in that space. It's as good as like these kinds of episodes in Clannad. It's as good as these kinds of episodes in the Haruhi series. It's as good as these kinds of episodes in K-On! It's as good as these kinds of episodes in Tamako Market. Like, this show is absolutely hitting beat for beat on that specific point. It's just when you have that contrast with season 1 and this show never really kind of gets there, that feeling of disappointment is hard to escape, I think.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm kind of pulled in two directions here, because part of me wants to say, oh, but we shouldn't deprioritize the episodic level too much, because like I think it's easy to forget that is what TV is, and it is like the individual episodes do so much matter, and there are all kinds of I think ways you can argue that modern TV, and this is an absolute fucking problem in American TV these days, over prioritizes the season and under prioritizes the episode. So you get these messy, mushy shows that have no real episodes. They just have 10 hours of stuff that is kind of cut up and they suck, right? And I want to praise the episode side of it and like say that like whatever little issues I had with the overall arc, it doesn't matter because I love the individual episodes so much. But I also don't want to be a hypocrite, because this is basically you and I are making the reverse argument of Tamako Market, where Tamako Market, the main arc of it, mainly because of the Dara stuff, did not land for me. But then we would go through the episodes and you would be like, but Jonathan, this episode was great, and this episode was great. And I'd go, no, that episode's great, but like it didn't work for me. So I'm of two minds. And I think what we're saying here is, what I think we've landed on is this weird middle point where like, clearly we have proved the point that both the episodes really do matter and also the seasonal structure really does matter, because if you don't necessarily nail both, some people, Sean in one case, me in the other case, will be disappointed. This is an interesting study in contrasts, actually.
Yeah, because I think for me with Tamako Market, that is a show where like the broad season feels so vague in whatever it is, because that show is so episodic. It's so intensely episodic. Whereas this one, and again, it's partially the contrast with season 1, like it is hard to let go of what that show was able to do with its 12 episode structure, that this one feels like, again, it's not even that this show isn't trying to do that, because it is clearly replicating specific things that the season 1 did do. I think kind of consciously it is doing that. It puts the two-parter in the same place. It's doing similar things with it. It is just that like it doesn't have as clear of a spine to be told. But yes, I think there's a clear push and pull here between what are the individual episodes doing on their own sake, like, put it in a bucket, like watch if you give this episode to somebody completely out of context, they're doing this weird thing where you just have like, you press these buttons on your remote and you end up in these different places. Let's call them channels. And there's just a thing that's playing on it. And it's just on there. You didn't choose to watch it. You made no choice for it to start. It's just already going no matter what. And you just sort of see it. In that sort of weird alien scenario of watching a television show, like, these episodes are phenomenal. On like, there's really kind of like no, obviously one or two of them would be a little confusing if you didn't have the context, but most of them, honestly, like that broader context is not that necessary, especially if you've seen season 1 and you already know who the characters are. But there is that when you're putting them all in sequence and you're thinking about the bigger picture structure and how these episodes build on each other and how they exist in relationship with each other, that's where I think the gaps in the show really pop up.
Yeah. I think it is an interesting conversation we're having. And yeah, but let's go through some of these individual episodes, because the other thing we also don't want to take for granted, which I think maybe we learned with Beyond the Boundary, is just how fucking great the basics of Kyoto Animation comedy, animation, character work, direction are. That even where this show is falling flatter in some places, it's also punching above a weight that most anime could ever imagine.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you want to start, just go through some of these individual episodes?
Yeah, so, you've got episode 1, which is our Ishihara Tatsuya one, right, where it's sort of just picking up that, from where the movie left off and establishes this whole element of them living together. I love the opening sequence of this episode where you've got the split screen effect. Yes. Where Rikka is just in her bed, and you just get this long sequence of Yuta waking up. He goes and brushes his teeth. He goes to make breakfast. There's this whole big sequence of things he goes through to eventually he goes and knocks on Rikka's door, and then he walks in, and the split screen combines, and he has to wake her up. Yes. It's such a great opening scene to the season.
Yeah, I do love seeing their dynamic where he is giving a little more of his Chuunibyo side to her, and when they do that, it is so cute and fun when we get scenes like that. It's very good. But I do think just the whole comedy scenario, it's a really good season premiere in that sense, of the entire idea that they are doing this thing that would be kind of taboo anywhere, but is also really taboo in Japan. They're two kids in love living together, and they're trying to figure out how to keep that from people. But of course, it falls apart immediately as soon as their teacher is like, "We're sending stuff to your house, Rikka, and none of it's arriving. What's going on?" And I love that. And I love that Utoka comes and there's a big silly battle at the end and all of that. It's a definite starting on a high note, I think.
Yes, and it sets off my favorite thing in many ways in this season, which is Kumin is just giving ridiculous puns. It feels like they're we're not entirely sure what to do with Kumin as a character for some of this show. So it's let's just give her a pun book, and she's just going to be reading off puns like an absolute maniac, and it persists the entire season, and it's fucking great. And they set it up right at the beginning. You have the whole thing of Nibutani shows up, and she's dyed her hair black, or her hair has always been black. I don't know if she had dyed her hair orange. I don't know which way that went. But she has black hair, and she's trying to be the classic kind of Ojo-sama, Maria-sama ga miteru kind of show thing. And everyone else is what the hell is going on? And I love that Kumin interprets it as this very elaborate joke, this bokeh setup that Nibutani is doing. And I love the idea that Kumin has just in between shows gotten really into Japanese comedy, and that's her whole thing now.
Kumin, I think, might be the most perfectly dialed in aspect of this season.
Yes.
I think, because it would be easy to go too far with that character and try to give her too much of a dramatic arc or too much material or anything when she is essentially she is the, comic relief on the side. But I think they dial her in just right, where I don't think they overexpose it, but they bring her in more than she was in season 1. They give her these couple of recurring characteristics, because fundamentally she is an outsider looking in on the plot. She is never really in their inner circle, and there's even a little bit of that at the end. I think there's a very sweet moment near the end of this season where she's talking about how she's never been in Chuunibyo, but she finds it really sweet that it is this thing that connects all the other characters. And honestly, it feels like the K-On! Touch a little bit there of just perfectly understanding someone on the side where you never quite move them into the very middle of it, but by the end, there's something about their positionality that has not just been funny along the way, but provides a touching alternate angle on the characters. Kumin is just perfectly dialed in this season.
Yeah, absolutely. She's my MVP for season 2 for sure. I already talked about that. I think the animators just have the most fun with her and her expressions and stuff like that. And I think part of it is her being the senpai, right? She's the oldest one of the group, so it is both she gets to give that occasional piece of advice, but also she just is in a position where she can just fuck with them whenever she wants to, because that's just the way that kind of relationship works. And the way she does that is by saying weird puns to them all the time is phenomenal. You also have that great moment in episode 2 where Yuta and Rikka are shopping at the grocery store and she finds the spice called cumin.
Yes.
and Rikka's like, cumin. And she keeps on just saying cumin to Yuta, and all the other girls are spying on them. And Yuta says something that's like we don't put that in our curry. That's not what we use for our recipe. And then cumin gets mad at him the next day for it.
There's that. Also, doesn't Dekomori go, we've got to go find Dekomori now?
Yes.
She's like, find the Dekomori spice. Oh, that's so good. Episode 2 also has a lot of great comedy. One of my favorite parts being we learn what Rikka is spending all of her money on, where she's bought her dumb night vision goggles, which become a thing throughout the whole season, and we find out she spent like all of the almost 300,000 yen her sister sent her on that. Is one of the biggest laughs I got this season, because it's very true to Rikka. It's something that does continue throughout the whole season, and it is also funny that she thought she could survive the month on, you have the screenshot here, 978 yen, which for people who don't know the exchange rate, less than $10.
Yes. This $10, that's all you need.
Let's just say it, Sean, we've all been there with something stupid we bought in our Chuunibyo-ness.
Yes, well, no. I'm a miserly, cheap fucker,
Okay.
so no. I have never done that. That's maybe more of a Jonathan problem than a Sean problem.
Okay, well, thank you. Anyway, I've never bought night vision goggles, so we'll just say that.
Yes, I was once tempted to be like, there's that, I think it was Modern Warfare 2, the original Modern Warfare 2 had their like dumb special edition, came with like incredibly cheap, shitty night vision goggles. I was like, that seems like a dumb way to own night vision goggles, but I already had a cat-sized Master Chief helmet, so I didn't need those.
Yeah, once you bought that Halo 3 special edition, nothing else was ever really going to be worth it again. So
yeah.
All right. What else from episode 2? We already talked a little bit. That's the date episode. They go to the aquarium. I just cannot stress enough how perfectly that is. Like, I had like visceral nostalgia with just watching them go through that, because the Kyoto Aquarium is really cool, and it is like they go to all the spots that like I have photos from. Like they go to there's a standing tank where like the seals can come up. Like they swim and they go up into a tank that's like standing upright, so you can see them like in full view. There's stuff like that they have in there. They have the dolphin show room is like exactly right. It was just very cool. And it did make me look up, like, are they supposed to be in Kyoto in this scene? And I looked it up, and they never say in Love, Chuunibyo and Other Delusions what town they are in specifically, but the school they based the school in this show on, in their like location scouting, is within day trip distance to Kyoto. So that does work out. They don't say they went to the Kyoto Aquarium, but it does work out with the geography of where they scouted things.
Yeah, that whole scene in the aquarium is phenomenal. I love the part where Rikka's like gets picked to go do the dolphin show thing, and she says that she's like a fifth grader or something.
Yes.
And then she, when she does the thing where she like raises her hand to make the dolphin spin or whatever, she's just like, "Aha! Like now, dolphin, you obey my command and my will." And Yuta gets incredibly embarrassed. Then you just have the whole thing. I like the little like recurring thing in that episode. They have the windmills. Or the big wind turbines there that Rikka's like trying to use her Chuunibyo powers to turn. And that's where you get Ichitamaya doing this like, like it's like Dragon Ball noise, which is very adorable.
We cannot praise Ichitamaya enough. She is so good. I think she's even better this season. Just the amount of range she has, the explosiveness of the comedy. She's incredible.
Yes, she does a really good job. Because like since the character's kind of taken out of focus for long stretches of the show, it does kind of give her more things to do because she doesn't have the pressure of being like the protagonist character effectively. She just gets a lot more like, just kind of weird shit and kind of high comedy and reaction stuff she gets to do that she didn't really get to play so much in season 1.
Yes. Episode 3 is the one where we basically meet Satone, and we have some of the adventures with that. I think there's some very good comedy in this one. You didn't put a screenshot gallery up, but I'm sure there would be a lot of beautiful stuff if you had. It's a good episode.
Yeah, so that's just where you get all the stuff of her being the Maho Maho shoujo, which is incredibly fun to say. and her like getting on the announcements to say like Angel, like I'm here to fight you,
Yes.
and all that stuff I really enjoyed.
I do like the like little thread of there's more magic girl stuff brought into their Chuunibyo fantasies because of Satone. And there's even, I think, in a late episode, an entire scene where like she and Nibutani are going back and forth on like the proper versions of like what a magical girl are. And I just love their obsession with it, because there's also a sense, like with Rikka's delusions, they don't seem to have a great sense of what these fantasy concepts actually are, and they're making it up as they go along, which is what kids do, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, because, just for people who don't know, like, what she's doing with, like, Maho Shoujo is what Magical Girl is, and then Mao is, like, the Demon King, like, in a fucking Dragon Quest game or something.
Or Piccolo.
So
Piccolo is Mao Piccolo, yeah.
Yes,
Demon.
yeah, so it's Maho Mao Shoujo, which is just a very weird kind of, like, I have no idea what that's even supposed to mean concept, but it's very funny. And all her weird shit about being, like, Sophia Saturn the Seventh and all this shit.
Yes.
It's good.
I want to see that Sailor Moon show.
Yes.
There's even in the Chuunibyo light shorts, the final one, there's just a little post-credits bonus where they just do a full magical girl transformation sequence with her that I feel like was something they probably storyboarded for one episode and didn't have room for, so they just animated it to be cool, and it is a very cool, magical devil girl transformation sequence.
Yeah, it did retroactively make me bummed, though, that it wasn't in the show proper, because I was like, because I hadn't even thought of it. I was like, man, how did they never give her a big, ridiculous comedy Sailor Moon transformation? That's a little bit of missed opportunity. Maybe, I know this character is also going to be in the movie finale, so maybe they'll have one there on a big movie budget or something, but...
Yeah. Episode 4 is the first Takamoto Yasuhiro one of the season, and it is so fucking good. That is the one where Nibutani decides to run for student council, and it is also where Dekomori believes for the first time, or seems to believe, that Nibutani is the real Mori Summer and becomes her servant, and it is the most delightful, cute episode. There is a scene, because Dekomori becomes, like, unbelievably over-the-top fawning onto Mori Summer, and, like, just the most loving, like, servant girl ever, and there is this scene where she gives her these cookies that she's made, and I put this on Twitter because I couldn't get over it. The way Sumire Uesaka, who voices Dekomori, says the word cookie there it's like, if I had to define Moe, it is how she says cookie in that scene as she hands them to Nibutani and wants to see her, incredible senpai Mori Summer enjoy the cookie. It blew my mind how cute that was. I don't even get that into the Moe side of things. I was just like, oh my god, that's the cutest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, well, so now we've got two things. We've got Yukiko for Persona 4 and glasses, and we've got Dekomori baking cookies. We know if we want to make a Moe show for Jonathan, we're assembling our cast slowly but surely.
I want to... there's a slight difference there. didn't say I was, like, attracted to this in the way I was Yukiko in glasses. But, it was...
Moe is it's a complicated feeling.
That's true.
There's a lot in there. We went through the whole story with it, what feels like 3 years ago.
Yes, but if the Moe thing is must protect at all costs, it is Dekomori saying cookie. I'm like, we have to protect her. She is sacred. It's so funny. I love this one.
Yeah, because they're Mori Summer cookies, so they're like shaped to be like Mori Summer with her weird veil and all that shit, which is impressive for Dekomori to be able to make those. Yeah, but this is a fun episode. Like, this episode also sort of highlights what is like the real romantic relationship in the show, which is Nibutani and Dekomori. It feels like this thing that, like, over the course of season 1, they slowly started to discover, and then in the OVA in season 1, they like locked in and were like, this isn't just a sort of fun rivalry. These two characters are in love with each other, and it is the most intense romantic relationship you get. And it's like they really, across this season, they really lay it on. That's like, because there's a point near the end where I think it's in episode 11 where Satane, so Nibutani shows up as Mori Summer to try to cheer up Satane. And then she ends up hugging Mori Summer. And that's when Dekomori shows up, and Dekomori gets, like, freaked out by it. And she goes, like, how could you do... Like, you're not only after Dark Flame Master, you're also after fake Mori Summer. Yes. And it's like, well, there's no way to read that statement other than her being jealous and upset that, like, this other girl is macking on Mori Summer. It's like, wow, it's not even a subtext at that point. It's just what they're talking about.
100%. Honestly, I think it's well done over the course of the season. It is because they do this episode, and then there is a clear follow-up later on. I forget which episode it is exactly. Is it episode 8?
9? Or, yes.
It's episode 8, where you have a new fake Mori Summer, and it's a clear call and response. It is a very clear, like, we had one version of this, we go further with it. That one even brings it in that, like, the fake Mori Summer in that episode is explicitly, like, attracted to Deko Mori and wants to be her girlfriend, basically. And Deko Mori doesn't want that, and the real Mori Summer, real Nibutani, is very jealous because clearly they are fucking in love. It's just they are in love. They love each other. The way they show it is by fighting and arguing, which, hey, we've all known couples like that. Come on, that's a thing in the world. And by the end of the season, it just feels like that's the thing. I did ask, my brother has seen the movie now. I don't think you've seen the movie, right?
No, I've not.
And I did ask him, like, does this continue? Do they? And he says, oh, it becomes pretty explicit. And I was like, great, because it's already pretty explicit. I love this relationship. They are the true power couple of this show, and I love them. I also love, at the climax of episode 5, the way that Deko Mori torpedoes her student council run by reading from the Mabinogion and showing the picture that she took of her up on stage. I laughed so hard at that. It's so good.
Yeah, and I like that episode leaves it up to your interpretation. At what point, like, did Deko Mori ever, like, was it real that she believed that's like, oh, it's this real Mori Summer, or was that like a 5D chess move, or was that like at what point did it shift? Like, I like that they never really zoom in on that. They leave it up to your interpretation of, like, was she intentionally sabotaging that run? If so, at what point is that what it became? But yeah, it's good.
Yeah, wonderful. And then let's spend some time on episode 5, Sean.
Yes. Yeah, episode 5, where I'm just going to read my description in my notes, because I was rereading this the other day. You could kind of tell I've been busy at work, and so I was watching some of these episodes like late before somebody has to get up at fucking 5:30 in the morning, because I just, like, my note here is just so direct. Episode 5. The club is in danger of being disbanded because they don't do anything. Nana-chan sensei tells them that competitive napping is a thing. She sets up a scrimmage with another school's siesta association. The conditions are set that if they lose, the club will disband. They win because Kumin is a nap monster. Like, that's all I went for my notes for episode 5.
But that's correct. That is an objectively accurate summary of this ridiculous episode of television that I love so, so much.
Yes, so this one, it's just crazy. Like, I love this whole notion of competitive napping, and I looked it up to see if there was, like, any sort of truth here, and it's like there are some, like, sort of novelty one-off, like, oh, it's a competitive siesta or something, that I think is maybe where they got the idea, because there was a specific, like, siesta thing. But unfortunately, there's, as far as I can tell, I'm not going to be able to set up a competitive napping club at the high school I work at, which is what I really wanted to do after watching this, because as someone who gets up at 5:30 in the morning, I've really gotten very good at taking naps, so I feel like I would be a real competitor if this existed. But this is where you get probably my two favorite things about this episode are, one, everything of all the scenes where they have the fucking cardboard boxes set up where they're sleeping in, and the amount of fun they have storyboarding and directing those scenes are phenomenal. The other thing is the new girls they introduce, because there is this insane assemblage of the other team, where the main one is Nimri Sui, which on all these names are puns. That one is the most intense because it's just a kanji that means sleep and a different kanji that means sleep. And she is the chairman of the Siesta Association at this other high school. And I love this character design. Her big, crazy, weird, curly hair. She's got these little bubbles that sort of just emanate from her because she's very tired and her eyes are always only half open. And it's also fun because we get a little cameo from a voice actress we haven't heard from in a while, which is this character is voiced by Nakahara Mai, who is Nagisa from Clannad. So it's been a while since we had Nagisa or Nakahara Mai in a show we've watched, and that was fun to have her back, giving an incredibly sleepy performance, but in a way that is a compliment, not a... Usually when you say that's a very sleepy performance, that's a criticism. This is, like, fully appropriate. But then you just have, like, all these other characters where you have the whole sequence once the competition starts, where it pans over to each character. And this is the only time in this show they do this, where they bring up the character names and then they all have like a title or whatever. And so you've got Nasutaka Fujiko, you've got Ichiba Parumu, which that Parumu is just written with the kanji for spring and dream. You've got Tenpaku Yoko, which Yoko there means sheep girl. Sheep, like counting sheep. And then you've got Utsutoge Totomi. And all of them are these very sleepy girls who are barely awake, just standing there with weird, like, sleep bubbles emanating from them. And I love these absolutely insane, weird-ass characters we are given.
It's incredible. And then the way they decide to visualize the nap battle sequence, which in reality is just 10 people sleeping. But they do it as this entire internal battle where they're sending out their crazy powers, they're in crazy get-ups, but then it does these rapid cut-ins to the real world where, like, something crazy happens, and then it is Nibutani going, oh no, I got a cramp, and then she's out. And then they just keep going like that until finally Kumin, of course, slept through it all, and she is fine. Oh my god. It's one of the best silly fake battles in this show, and that's saying something, because the silly fake battles in this show are incredible.
Yes, because also, like, I think the way the show, like, presents it is also, like, was the battle that we saw, was that just Kumin's dream? Or is there something more there? Like, what were we really seeing? But I just love, like, the absolute stupid fucking idea of competitive napping, which, it just needs to be emphasized. What an incredibly dumb fucking idea that is. And, of course, the conclusion at the end, like, is just that she just didn't wake up. And so I love that you have this whole weird fantasy sequence. It kind of fades to black after she becomes an angel in her fantasy dream and shoots Demari Sui with, like, a giant fucking laser thing with this big, like, I forget what the thing is called, but it's from, like, Hermes from Greek mythology, and it's this whole, like, it's like a lyre big thing, and which they also had in the movie. And then it fades to black, and it fades in on she's just asleep, and you get some just good animation of her being very sleepy. And then they wake her up and she's awake and it's just over. It's probably been over for like an hour or something because everybody else is gone other than her team. Like the whole enemy team and Nana-chan Sensei and everyone else has left. It's like, clearly it's, really late. And the idea that that's just what a napping competition is she just went to sleep and then like a couple hours later she wakes up and it's been over for like an hour is so good and fucking stupid.
I love it. I also think it breaks my brain a little bit that they've done so many of the different, over the course of the Kyoto animation shows we've watched, so many of the different fake sports clubs, real sports clubs done completely ridiculously, competition episodes. We've had our baseball matches, we've had our fantasy baseball matches like in Haruhi where they, are using the like magical bat and all that stuff. And we have this, and we've the whole time been joking about them making a real sports anime. This is the first one made after they have finally made a sports anime with Free. This is 1 year after Free premiered, which makes me wonder, is that just what every episode of Free is increasingly silly scenarios of swimming? Maybe. I want to see that show now.
No, I think it's just increasingly loving slow pans over their wet abs. I think that's what it is. That's my impression from now. I owned the first 2 seasons of Free on Blu-ray, and the box art for those Blu-ray sets do not hide the appeal of the show. No. I have some sexy swimming boys with their abs fully exposed. It's just right next to my TV it's been like that for a couple weeks now.
Indeed. So yeah, it's good stuff. I love it when KyoAni does any kind of silly club competition. It's always good. This is one of the best.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And again, I just want to stress also there's the whole middle section of the show where they have set up their practice stage or whatever with the cardboard boxes. And they have so much fun with all the shots of them in their little boxes and panning over from one to the other and then zooming out to show them all in a row, which is just an incredible, dumb visual gag. And like the way that they like will peek over the boxes, because there's one part where they hear Rikka moaning and they think, oh, is like Yuta and Rikka, are they up to something dirty? And it's just she's has sleep paralysis or whatever. But there's so many good little visual gags with these really strong, hard divisions with these 5 different boxes they're all in. And it's a real kind of like display of some great storyboarding there.
Yeah, it's outstanding. All right.
All right.
Then we have our two-parter, basically, right? Where we have the school field trip.
Yes.
Yeah. I think, you all know my feelings on Kitanohara Noriyuki at this point. I sing his praises on every single episode. I do think that 6th episode where we have, I think, a particularly good set of scenes about Rikka and Yuta's relationship. And I'm even talking less on the level of plot than I just think it's spectacularly storyboarded, animated, composed, all the stuff where she comes into his room at night. Not in a sexual sense, in a weird, I've got my, night vision goggles on sense, and scares all the boys. That's so good. And then I think the scenes after that where they have kind of a heart-to-heart about shyness and these sorts of things. It's a remarkably well-directed episode of TV, which is true of everything Kitanohara Noriyuki's name has ever been on.
Yeah, but yeah, it's definitely one of the best looking episodes of this show. It has a couple of things that are the, like, if you know Kitanohara Noriyuki, you do not have to look up the credits.
Yes.
There's one shot, it's maybe about 30 seconds long, of just Dekomori on this, like, on the windowsill back at the clubhouse, because she and obviously Kumin haven't gone because they're in different school years as our main characters. And she's just sitting there, and there's just this, or she's not sitting there, she's hanging there in what looks like the most uncomfortable position you could possibly be on this windowsill. And the camera just holds on that shot for about 30 seconds until eventually she just starts, like, flips over and almost falls off and almost dies, falling out of the window. That is an incredibly Kitanohara Noriyuki, like, we're just gonna be here and, like, feel the boredom for a little bit. And then at the very end of the episode, and this just made me laugh because you specifically called out this same thing that happens in his Hyoka episode, which is the helicopter one, where there's this mountain in the background, which they use in a bunch of different, these, like, establishing shots that just is gorgeous. And this mountain, or I think it's like a dormant volcano. It just looks fucking great. And then you have this shot from Rika's perspective where she's holding out her hands, and there's this street that extends into the distance with all these different traffic lights, and they're all on red. And then she sort of, like, encourages you to, like, come over here, help me, and Yuta comes in, and then this is all this one sustained shot just from Rika's POV, and she puts down one of her hands in the corner of the frame, and then Yuta's comes in to replace it, and then zooms out, and they go, ha! And then they put their hands together, and smile at each other, and then it holds on the shot of just the street with the traffic lights, and one by one they slowly all turn green, and then they put their hands up once they're all green and go, yeah! And that's the end of the episode, and it just cracked me up because, obviously there's a lot of different stuff going on in that scene than the equivalent scene at the end of Hyoka, but it is so similar with the traffic light fixation. It's very funny.
Kitanohara Noriyuki is a director who is, like, his authorial signature is any kind of signature of durational time. And, like, that is most obvious in Someday in the Rain, which is his masterpiece. Still maybe my favorite episode we've watched this entire season. But, like, it is true in all his stuff, even in an episode like this that has a lot more madcap comedy than I feel like they typically, and that's true of the finale of this one too, he doesn't typically tend to take the more explosively funny episodes. This one has some explosively funny moments, but he'll still find moments like you're talking about with Dekomori hanging over the edge of the window, or the end of the episode here, and do that, and it's just, he places you in moments so beautifully, and I think it's something this episode does really tenderly and really powerfully. You feel the moments that these characters live in. There's also a detail at the end of that one I love. I love any time Yuta kind of comes more to Rika's side in the Chuunibyo affair, not to, like, engage in her delusions, but just to have fun in the way that she has fun with it, and he'll stop remembering that he's trying to be normal for a second, and that is one of those moments where they do their big yell, and then the last shot of the episode is them doing that, and there's, like, 3 people crossing the street in the right-hand side of the frame who slowly, because that shot's pretty long near the end, finally start to look over their shoulder like, what the fuck? And I just love scenes like that, and that's one of the best ones.
Yeah, this episode is phenomenal. It's just so moody, and this part of that, like, that durational element of it, it's having these, like, really great shots of this dormant volcano overlooking this, whatever city they're in Japan. You get, obviously, because this is all a real location, so they obviously went on location scouting and stuff for it, so you get all these different kind of landmarks they're staying in front of, like these big gothic kind of structures and stuff. There's this cool big, like, artsy chess pieces on this big chessboard and stuff, and you just get a look at all these different elements of this town that we've had so many of these episodes at this point, because so many KyoAni shows are high school shows. I mean, almost all of them, that you get your school field trip. And so we've had a lot of these, and this is an especially good one. You also have one of my favorite puns from Kumin Senpai, which is she has, they're talking about being bored, and in Japanese, bored, the word is taikutsu. And so she has her socks on, and the socks are kutsushita, which means like under shoes, literally. And she says like, tai kutsushita, and she's got her socks it's a sock with a Thai fish just on the bottom of it, and it's great. And then one of the eye catches from that episode is her just with her big dumb sock with the stupid fish on it, just smiling at the camera, and I love it. It's such a dumb fucking pun, but it's great.
Yeah, no, this is one of the best episodes of the season of the show.
Yes.
It's great.
It's definitely the one that I felt like is the strongest that Yuta and Rikka's relationship is depicted. Like, it's so, you feel their relationship, and it feels like you've kind of come out a little bit of the weird kind of caretaker role that Yuta's been given, and he gets to be a little bit more of just like a high schooler again. Because I do think that an issue this show has sometimes is Yuta as a character feels like he doesn't have a really clear position always in the show, and he feels a little less interesting than he did in season 1 because he has to be a little bit more male romance lead dude because he's got 2 women who love him now. And I think that kind of makes him it flattens him a little bit as a character. And I think here he feels more like a high school boy. And I think they find like a space to really make him feel more like the character I think he's supposed to be like, but because of the plot of the show, sometimes he's not really in that position always.
Yes, I think he also feels like a high school boy in episode 7 because Satone comes into the fray, and Yuta doesn't do anything bad or wrong, but he is incredibly oblivious in the way high school boys often are. I had a disagreement with my brother on this one, who really hated how Yuta acted here, and I was like, he was not as sensitive to Rikka as he probably should have been. I also 110% buy this is what your random high school boy would do here, especially one who tends to try to please people the way Yuta does.
Yeah, because, he, from his perspective, Satane is this girl he's known forever.
Yes.
And she is his friend. So he sees her in trouble and he's going to want to help her.
Yes.
Not thinking about the other kind of romantic implications of what is going on in that relationship. Yeah, like I 100% think that this is a totally reasonable thing for this character to have done. Yeah.
Yeah, he is trying to, especially because we know that Yuta is almost pathologically helpful to people, right? Like he is almost a people pleaser in some ways, but like he genuinely cares. He is an empathetic person. That is why he gets close to Rikka when no one else does. Satone is a girl who has lost her bag. Like, there's the very funny moment where Rikka gives her like 100 yen bill and is like, get out of here, which is like a horrible, it's like, it's funny because Rikka does it. That's a horrible thing to do to someone who is your boyfriend's friend, right? Like, just get the fuck out of here.
She's a 14-year-old girl in a town she's never been to before, who is lost and doesn't have her phone or any money. Like, the situation she's in is fucking terrifying.
Yes, I think Yuta is completely justified in trying to help his childhood friend. He doesn't, go out of bounds and start like feeling her up or something. He's fine. And I think, but what I think is interesting, and this is where I also like this episode quite a bit, I think it shows that distance of, again, those ideas of vulnerability in a romantic relationship, of Rikka, because Rikka very clearly knows in this episode that she is being unreasonable, right? And she's trying to figure out why. Like, what is the feeling I'm feeling? Because this is kind of her first time experiencing jealousy, right? We've all been there. And I think it's interesting how she is trying to negotiate that, knowing that it doesn't really make sense. And then on the other side of that, Yuta having to realize that, while it is right of him to help Satone, he also can't just act towards every other girl the way he always would have, right? And I think the way they meet at the end of this one, where he gives her the birthday present, she gets, Mark III of, she doesn't call it that, she calls it something completely crazy, of her new umbrella. And then the end of that episode is where she basically looks into camera, or from Yuta's position, and says, skeet, adorably, as you have noted in your notes. It's just beautiful.
Yes, yeah, where it's just like, it's where you realize, like, man, they like never say that to each other.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I wrote ski in my notes to avoid the like, do you translate it as I like you or I love you, and the incredible vagaries of
Yes.
the word ski in Japanese. But yes, but they translate it as I love you, which makes sense. But
I think the emphaticness with which she says that there, like, that's kind of the only thing you have to go on when subtitling that. And I think she is emphatic, full voice. Rikka often talks a little more mumbly. She is fully articulate. She's saying I love you there. And it's a really nice. I think this two-parter is, I would agree with you in terms of the Yuta Rikka dynamic. It's the peak of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
And Yamamura Takuya, someone who doesn't direct as much as some of these other people, but another name that every time I see them, I'm like, that's a good episode. They do good work.
Yep. And then we get episode 8, which we kind of touched on before. This is the other side of the Mori Summer kind of duo, where you did have in 6 and 7, you get like little hints of this subplot where that there is someone who has set up this Mori Summer website because the girls are teasing Nibutani about it. And so yes, you have fake Mori Summer, not actual Mori Summer, that is called fake Mori Summer by Dekamori. So we have another new character here who is voiced by Koshimizu Ami, who we have seen in a bunch of stuff. She is Jonathan's beloved Yukiko from Persona 4.
Absolutely.
She is Beidou in Genshin Impact, Ryuko in Kill la Kill, so on and so forth. Lots of great, just like really phenomenal actress who gets this one fun, very juicy role. Which I don't even know if this ever comes up in the show, but in the credits when I was looking up the actors, they named the character Natsumi Tokugawa, which I don't know if the show actually ever says that that's her name.
Such
but
a
that's
good
very
name.
good. Because Natsu meaning summer, so there's a little bit there. Then Tokugawa, of course, being the great 200-year-long shogunate in the Edo period of Japanese history. So I assume she's descended from the Tokugawas.
I think it makes sense that the Tokugawas, they ultimately lost their power, and now their descendants are trying to position themselves as the one true Mori Summer. Makes sense.
Exactly.
I do love just how much more of the Mori Summer lore we get this season, and I feel like it's never to the point where they pour it on too thick, because it never makes sense. It's the right kind of Chuunibyo fantasy where the more you learn about what Mori Summer thinks she is, the less it holds together, which is also true of all of Rikka's weird delusions. And I love all of that, because there's also more of it because of Satone, who knew Mori Summer in middle school. We get that detail, and so there's some fun flashbacks to that. There's a good Chuunibyo short about that's very funny. But yeah, I love it. I love that they basically stunt casted our fake Mori Summer, just got a great guest voice in there. And yeah, it's delightful.
Yeah, and she's just an absolute perv for Dekamori, and it's all good. And I find like that whole character, this dynamic, very amusing. And I do love, specifically with Nibutani, I talked about this in season 1, but I really like whenever you get those little hints of the Mori Summer is still in there, right?
Yes.
This is who that person is. She's just trying to hide it. And whenever it leaks out in this, like, where she just like says something that's a little weird, and it's that, like, she's into crystals and spirits and that kind of thing. And it's just that kind of new age spiritualism thing that is kind of Nibutani's version of it. That stuff just amuses me, because that is, as from an American perspective, that's much more what you think of when you think of the equivalent of a Chuunibyo.
Yes. Of
like a high school girl who's like kind of has gotten way too into that kind of stuff. And as a teacher, I've run into this a fair amount, and it's funny how accurate that stuff can be, especially because Nibutani's trying to hide it in some ways. It makes it feel even more realistic when it just sort of slips out. You're like, all right, you are kind of a little weird. You're just a little off. The way you see the world is just a bit different than other people.
Have you ever had to confiscate any crystals at school?
I have not had to confiscate any crystals yet.
Yeah. All right. One day, maybe. No, it's a good one. One little conversation I wanted to have that I'm curious. So this season, this is another theme I think we've seen in the Splendid Isolation section of this season, is that there are more, like, it has not been super explicit yet, but there are more queer or queer adjacent characters showing up in KyoAni stuff. We got that in Tamako Market a little bit, right? With her friend who is in love with her. There's also the character who's played by Ono Daisuke that is kind of him. You can read ambiguously in terms of whether they're trans or not. And then here you have kind of three things to cue in on. You have the overall Nibutani Dekumori romance, which is beautiful and sweeping, and I think the romance of our time, really. Then you have fake Mori Summer, very clearly in love with Dekomori. And then in the finale, you have the scene with the friend who is totally on the fringes of this season, and I'm forgetting his name.
Yes, Makoto.
Yes, Ishiki.
Ishiki, who was a pretty big supporting character in the first season, and they have just relegated him as a joke character to the extent where his one joke is that everyone forgets who he is.
Yes.
So when he shows back up, everyone's like, who are you again? And he usually has like a weird hairstyle, or he's tanned or whatever. But it is funny how quickly that dude got kind of Yamcha'd in the sense of he's just been sort of pushed to the edges of the show.
I enjoyed how they did that. But then in the finale, you do have the scene where he seems to be entertaining the romantic advances of someone named Chidori, and we learned that Chidori is a man he met while working as a lifeguard, and it is unclear how into it he is, but it plays closer to a gay panic joke than you probably would want, right?
Yes, I think it is very notable that where some of these shows are extending their kind of like looking at more homosexual sort of relationships, that it's between two women than two men, which is why I say is like far more typical, not just in anime, but also in Western fiction.
Yes.
Things tend to be more comfortable with that, especially if it's going to be in a show or in a whatever it is that's not specifically about that relationship. It's so rare that you see something with like two gay men together being the sort of focus of something like that.
Yeah, because
I definitely raised my eyebrow at that joke in episode 12 for sure.
It's far from the worst version of that I've seen, and there's even, I think,
but it edges up to the like, because it does the like, he kind of does the little kind of squeal, and there's a flower that's on the outside of the bathhouse door, which is where all this happens, and that falls down as a where I don't think the thing is that literally they had sex, but it's a visual metaphor to make the joke. It's like, oh, what if they fucked? That would have been funny.
Yeah, I found it a little funny because it literally falls down over the kanji for men outside the bathhouse, and I thought the framing was kind of funny, but also funny in the kind of raise an eyebrow way. Yeah, it's interesting because not that it's my place to say whichever of these are correct or not, but I did not find anything too objectionable in the fake Mori Summer plot, because it didn't feel like they were making fun of the character for being in love with Dekomori. We're all in love with Dekomori, and the whole point is Nibutani's jealous of it, right? But then the scene
I think the thing that makes it a lot better for the fake Mori Summer thing is that Nibutani and Dekomori have this sort of like pseudo romantic connection already.
Yes.
So it's not someone who's straight being preyed upon by someone who is gay or queer, and that's like the trope.
Yes.
Right? And so that's, I think, one of the reasons why it doesn't feel that bad, because in episode 8, it's just a different girl that is into Dekomori that's not the Nibutani we know that drives this wedge within that relationship, which is the same kind of thing that the more generic version of the Satane character would be doing in the Yuta-Rika relationship.
Right. Yeah. So just worth, calling out there. It's an interesting thing that happens here. Overall, I think we're seeing some interesting movement in the Kyoto Animation stuff. I'm curious what happens in the future with some of these shows. You know more than me there.
Yes. There will be some shows where that kind of stuff will come up. Okay. Yes. That we have not yet watched.
Interesting. All right. So we were on episode 7 and 8. Episode 9 is the beach episode, which is a lot of delightful animation, including, I just love the whole idea that Kumin's family has a beach shack called the Napping Spot. Isn't that what it's called? Or,
yes. Yeah. Yeah, Hiruneya, which is like napping shop, basically.
Yes, and we have Yuta's little sister cooking yakisoba there, right? And making stuff. And then this is also where Toka comes back. And there are so many good Toka jokes here. There's the moment where she comes back. She's got this little girl named Sento with her. And she says, "Oh, that's my daughter." And there's a solid 20 seconds of silence as everyone takes that in. And then they're like, "No way." And she's like, no, yeah, she's my daughter. And they're like, "How old is she?" And they're like, "She's 7. And like, "You had a baby when you were 17? And she's like, "Yeah, what about it?" And I love how far she keeps it going before finally saying, "No, of course I didn't, you idiot. This is my boss's daughter." And I love for that whole scene, Rika is in the background, not commenting on it because she would know the truth, but she's just letting Toka have her fun.
Yeah, or I wonder if she's just Rika's in her mind being like, "Wait, does she have a daughter?" like, when did that happen?
It's pretty great.
How did I miss that?
And I do like Sento as a character, the girl obsessed with samurai dramas, a different kind of Chuunibyo for us.
Yes, yeah, I do love. This should be, I think, Cento. I think is
Cento,
how it should be pronounced, because she's a little Italian girl. Because she's like the daughter of the chef that Toka is training under in Italy. And yes, and she's got her little like kabuto helmet thing on. And running around with a wooden sword and just hitting the shit out of people with this wooden sword. And it looks incredibly painful. Yeah, all that is great. She has that whole thing, because the plot of this episode is that Rikka feels like her powers are being drained away because it's her relationship and her love for Yuta is causing her to lose her Chuunibyo powers, which is what happened to Satane also in the past. I will say that some of this, like, the logic of the Chuunibyo stuff at this section of the show, 9, 10, 11, doesn't fully work for me entirely. It's not a big issue, but it's like, compared to season 1, where it felt really well-defined and clear in its dramatic stakes on what it meant, here, like, I get from a broad metaphorical perspective, you're climbing the steps to adulthood, which means that your Chuunibyo stuff, which is characteristics of your more childishness, that's starting to get sapped. Like, I understand what's supposed to be happening, but I think within the narrative framework of the show, it's kind of a little vague and weird. But whatever, it's just a justification for the plot of this episode.
Counterpoint, she gets a Gundam, and it's pretty cool. It's a good mecha. It's our...
Yes, it never comes up again, which is a disappointing revelation. But yes, that whole sequence where they vanish the world, you have this great, weird whole thing of like them surrounded by these film strips of things from season 1 of her memories with Yuta. And then she... gets injected. It gets very Eva for a little bit, where they're on like the planet and she floats up and these giant like needle things inject into her with this big like magic Gundam fluid. And then, she says like version upgrade, and ends up with this big weird Gundam exoframe, and then says that the Jiao Shingun has been revived, and everybody around her on the beach claps, which is very good.
Yes.
So yes, it's the Chuunibyo stuff. It's a lot more kind of vague and ill-defined, I think, in season 2. But some of those sequences are still very cool in their own right.
Yes, I agree. But this episode is such a delight. I also love the sequence where Cento is trying to get them to block the sword by doing the hand clap, and Rikka does this whole big preparation for it, where at first she's like, "Are you sure you're going to keep the eye patch on?" And then she's like, "Of course I am." And then she rethinks and is like, "Wait, no, I can't disrespect you by not using the full power of the Wicked Lord Shingon." I love all of that, and of course she gets whacked on the head, and it's great. The other thing to say about this episode is there's a lot of bikini shots, and I don't want to be too much of a perv online, but I do just have to say, Toka, the older sister in the bikini, is the hottest thing that Kyoto Animation has ever drawn. Oh my fucking god.
Man, I really did not know where this is. I was a little concerned about that this is going to end, given like the ages of.
There are adults on this show. I picked the adults.
I was just incredibly relieved when you said the word Toka. And I can't totally disagree, because you do have that great shot that kind of reminds me. There's a shot in Haruhi season 1 that is like a totally contextless moment in the remote island one, where you have this like random beautiful woman in a bikini on the boat or whatever. There's a shot kind of like that with Toka here, where she's standing on the concrete divider. It's the first time you see her. You just see her from behind, and she's got her, jacket on and her big hat. She's just standing there with her arms folded. You're seeing her from the back looking out over the ocean. And it is just this like, fuck yeah, Toka's back, because Toka is cool as shit.
Toka's cool as shit.
So.
She's my kind of girl, and also I just like the amount of loving attention that they put into her animation in this episode is so over the top. It is clearly not just me; it is the animators as well.
Well, you have this phenomenal scene between her and Yuta at night.
Yes.
That also, when I was going back through for screenshots, I realized is also where you get there's a little bit of foreshadowing for Chimera's pregnancy, because I think this is where that's supposed to happen, because there are some other cats that are getting lovey-dovey over there. I think there was some hardcore cat action going on behind the scenes of this episode. But the main focus of this whole sequence is Yuta and Toka kind of discussing the relationship he has with Rikka, and he kind of talks about how they really haven't done anything in that romantic kind of sense. And Toka's like, like that, like, how do you feel about that? Does that make you, excited or whatever, like, or like kind of disappointing yourself? And then at the end of that conversation, there's this great moment where he asks her, like, how do you feel? Like, are you disappointed or are you relieved? And she kind of mushes the two words together in Japanese and says, like, I'm disappointed relieved or something like that, and they definitely, when she turns around and says that, the animation on her face and everything they do, you could tell that, like, they really took a lot of care in that cut because it looks really good. And it's just the way her mouth moves and everything. It's very kind of exquisite. So I can see where you're coming from. I'm more into the puns, is what gets me going here, because you have the fucking pun. This might be the best one. This is the one that's so good that Yuta has to give it to Kumi. This is a good one, where she makes a sign for the shop that is, like, in English, it's just like bikinis are 30% off. But in Japanese, if you want to take something off, it's like hikini or bikini. And so it's sanwari bikini. So she says, oh, like, for bikinis is sanwari bikini is 30% off. And she has her little sign that says that, and it's good. Like, it's a legitimate, like, good work on that one. And there's a little smiling face with a wink on her sign. And, Kumin Senpai, she's just an entrepreneur in the making. Her and Nibutani should, like, make a shop and run it together.
Did you also have a little bit of, I know this is just a common beachside setting of that kind of open air restaurant, but especially with the shot of the shaved ice where they've got the octopus tentacles coming out of it, I had strong Squid Girl. Yeah. The whole, yeah.
Oh, 100%. Squid Girl, one of my favorite comedy anime. Yes, I was like, any second now, Squid Girl is going to come out of, like, the corner of this shack and try to, like, destroy our characters and invade them, and they get the shit kicked out of her by Toka. I think it's especially Toka, because it's like Toka feels like she could be a character in that show, because there's a cool older lady in that show that, defeats Squid Girl all the time. But yes, I definitely thought about Squid Girl.
Because if you haven't seen Squid Girl...
I think about Squid Girl all the time, because I think about Squid Girl literally every single time in an anime a character says itadakimasu, because there's a joke in Squid Girl where an English girl says, "Eat a duck, I must. There's duck in this." And every time I hear someone say itadakimasu, literally, it's been thousands of times, surely at this point, I think about the eat a duck, I must joke, because it's very funny to me.
I know. You've definitely told that story on the podcast before, because it is a very consistent thing about you, and I love it. But no, it's just because the setting, if you haven't seen Squid Girl, is set in a restaurant like that is this, like, open-air beachside. It's the exact setting of this episode, and, I'm not saying, like, this was a reference to Squid Girl. That is just a common Japanese site, but it's unshakable if you've seen Squid Girl.
Yes, it's Squid Girl is the definitive, like, beach shack restaurant anime.
Yes.
I don't know if there are a lot of other anime that are specifically as focused on beach shack restaurants, but Squid Girl is the one.
Well, we're going to find out in season 5 of Japanimation Station Seaside Restaurant Vacation.
Yes.
Anyway, we're going to talk about Squid Girl and possibly other shows. We haven't researched it yet.
I'll get to work. I've got a couple of season ideas. Maybe we can put those on the back burner, just so I can have an excuse to do a Squid Girl episode.
All right. In any case, moving on. Episode 10, another Takamoto Yasuhiro, another absolute banger. You want to tell us about it, Sean? Because you said this was the best one, so tell us why.
Yes, I mean, certainly if you're looking for the more dramatic episodes in season 2, I mean, this is the one, because this is the Satone episode, right? So this is, like, honestly, most of the episode is kind of from her POV, or from, like, the other girls as they're trying to kind of help solve this scenario. And Yuta and Rikka are very much in the background. But you have so much great stuff. I mean, first of all, it's just, Takamoto Yasuhiro, like, is... Other than, like, Kigami Yoshiji is, I think, like, the best episode director at KyoAni, and especially, like, Takamoto does a lot more episodes. It's just, you really appreciate it when you have stuff like the beginning of this episode that is a flashback of Satone remembering her and Yuta when they're in high school or in middle school together, waiting out under this sort of canopy during this rainy day. And it starts with the shot on their reflections in the puddle and then pans up. And then you get this shot from Satone's perspective, her looking at the rim of this like canopy and the rain dripping down. And like there's something about the editing and framing of that like sequence, because then it cuts back to her looking up at it, and Yuta says like, haha, like don't worry, you know, the spell I cast means we'll never have whatever fucking like physical damage has been completely nullified. Just dumb Chuunibyo shit. But he takes his jacket off and flips it up to kind of go over and cover both of them. And then she wakes up in her bed. You see her room, which has all these like, it has like a weird like arcade controller in there and all this weird like video game and like manga ephemera and all this stuff, which is great. And her having a very Yamada Naoko Keon-esque moment of her like remembering this thing in her bed and kind of freaking out about it, and all this stuff. And that just like that opening of the episode sets the tone so powerfully. And then when you get to the end of the episode, the very end of the episode like calls back to all that stuff, because you once again have Yuta and her under this canopy, this time at the shrine, and you have the same sequence of shots of it starting on their reflection, panning up, showing the both of them, and then a shot of the canopy edge that she's staring at, and then a shot of her, and then they have this whole conversation that then ends with him taking his jacket off and flipping it around, but instead of it going to cover both of them, he then runs out from under the canopy to go find Rikka, and it's that kind of like the storytelling that is being done there. You know, it's like, it sounds very kind of simple, but those sort of very simple things are so incredibly effective. And I think because the framing and the sequence and the editing of those shots is so striking. And also it's because KyoAni is like the best in the business at doing reflections in water.
Yes.
Like they're just so good at it, and the way the images distort in the water is just absolutely perfect. It is, you know, one of those moments where it feels like watching KyoAni shows is like watching anime with ray traced reflections on, because they're so fucking good at them. That when you get that callback at the end of the episode, and how much the heartache that Satane feels has been defined by the opening and the scene where then she wakes up in her bedroom. Like, man, that is like, that's what you want. Like, that's great direction. Like, that's great storytelling for a 20-minute episode of TV, is that framing. And then obviously you get all like these great moments in the middle of Satane trying to explore what these feelings mean, having to confront them again at the end. Just really phenomenal storytelling going on.
Couldn't agree more. Obviously, you know, it's a great piece of scripting too. Don't want to leave out Juki Hanada, who wrote, I think he wrote the whole season, right? It did, yeah. Mm-hmm. So great piece of scripting here too. But it is absolute directorial powerhouse. I think my heart belongs to Kitanohara Noriyuki as my favorite KyoAni director, but I will not disagree 1 inch on the greatness of Takamoto Yasuhiro. Absolute genius, and this one is proof of that. And I think this is the kind of stuff I really like this season. I like the stickiness and the messiness of what could be a much more conventional like love triangle story or a story about jealousy, and instead like there is no contemplation on Satone's part of like, I'm gonna break these two up and I'm gonna become his boyfriend and all of that. There is more maturity to it than that. She is a good person. The show at no point wants us to dislike Satone or view her as a threat to Rikka and Yuta, except on the level of she brings in some like sticky adult emotions that are hard to deal with. And this episode is because in this episode she really isn't talking to anyone about it yet. It is so internal. Like, so many of the key scenes here are not about her interacting with other characters who know what's going on within her head, but specifically interacting with people who don't. And I think the way that is illustrated is beautiful. There's always also that incredible scene where she is outside her apartment on the balcony that is right above the balcony that Yuta lives on. And she's just laying there in the shade, that like thin layer of shade that is there from the sun cast, and her heart sticker that she always has under her left eye keeps falling off, and she keeps trying to put it on, but it won't stick. I mean, talk about good visual metaphorical storytelling. Outstanding.
Yeah, it's just like the sense of lighting and the use of shadows in that sequence, because you have the part where there's like a wall and then that gives way to these rails, so you have like the thin shadow of the rails that kind of cast over her face, that then you have a similar sequence a little bit later when Yuta leaves with Rika and she to go to the Bone Oriri festival, and she then looks at them through the that kind of those rails that then start to look like a cage, and that she is up there sort of in this on this balcony, like crouched in the shadows, while Yuta and Rika are like out having fun going to this dance. Which is, yeah, it's just they're so good at depicting the heartache and just the drama of this moment for this character. As you say, I like that they don't make it about her, you know, trying to be with Yuta really romantically, because she knows that that's not possible. And so it puts this character, which is a very kind of stock character in many ways. She's been Chuunibyo-ified, but the childhood friend that's been in love with the main boy the whole time, but who that affection has never been noticed before. And you have like the special new girl who comes in, right? That's like, you know, a dime a dozen. I mean, that character is in literally, if it's a harem style romantic comedy, she's in literally 100% of them.
Yes.
That character's in all of them. But here, I think the fact that that relationship, that love is already over, it can't really happen. It does give it a very different kind of lens that I think is effective, and that Satane has set this challenge for herself to confront it and get over it without letting Yuta know, without disrupting his life. She just needs to sort of like, you know, she puts herself through this whole kind of emotional turmoil by making him tell her all the things he loves about Rika in order to sort of like force herself to get over it, which then backfires because him being nice, he comes back with that umbrella at the very end, and she turns around with tears in her eyes and tells him, you can't do that. Like, you can't, it's like, it's against the rules. And it kind of, you know, that facade breaks down for a second. The expression on her face at the very end is so kind of exquisitely perfect in the, like, her trying to sort of be, like, project that this hasn't emotionally devastated her, so she still technically has a smile, but that smile is just like wavering and like just destroyed, and then her tears then wipe off the heart mark under her cheek, which is again like that kind of motif in the episode. It's so good, all that stuff. The other thing in this episode is that it gave me hardcore Endless 8 flashbacks, because the episode starts with everyone at a pool, a swimming pool. After that opening sequence, you're at a swimming pool, and then later you're at the Bone Festival, the Bone Oriri Festival, which is the sequence of events in Endless 8 is it starts, they go to the swimming pool, and then they go to the Bone Oriri. And it's like, if this episode had kept on going and they ended up catching fucking cicadas on a mountain, I would have, like, my brain would have melted out of my ears. I'm like, what is even happening anymore? But there's like a specific establishing shot of the Bone Festival that looks so much like the shots, because obviously those festivals have like their traditional way they're structured, with like the big tower thingy in the middle, and then the lamps, like the lanterns that come off of it, that I had hardcore Endless 8 flashbacks. I was like, what is even happening in my life? And I had a weird moment when I was looking at that.
It's great. I mean, this is where I just, whatever other issues, this is where I cannot in any way write off this season, because I think it does unique things here that are just so beautifully done. And yeah, that is particularly, you were talking about the ray traced reflections, that shot near the end of Yuta running away with the jacket over his head. And that is a shot, it's not a still reflection, it is him running, and it's him running on top of the water and his reflection running in the water. I don't know how they did that. I don't know, Sean. I don't understand. I know they drew it, but the skill for it blows me away.
Yeah, it's really phenomenal. And it's just like all the shots with the rainy puddles, and there's like, you know the geography of this area, and so you can kind of see in shots of like, oh, the shrine in the background is being reflected here, even though the shrine's not in the shot. And that's ray trace. You know, this ain't no screen space shit, man. This is some proper ray traced reflections. You know, they went next gen because it's not even in the shot and it's still reflecting. Yeah, it's really good. It's, you know, it's the kind of thing, this is part of where I feel like I wish that the season was longer, because I would like more stuff with Satane.
Yeah.
Because she's just a character that I think you described as kind of vestigial earlier. And I do think that's a problem with her in the whole, like, I mean, for most of the season, is she's just kind of around the edges. And it's only in episode 7 that it first really kind of puts a spotlight on her. And then she's in episode 9 a lot, the beach episode, and then she has this episode. But it's like, you know, but that doesn't feel like enough time to have really sort of like sat with this character and experienced that. And the fact that they kept her on the edges for episodes 1 through 6 so much just feels like, a little something is missed by the fact that this hasn't been set up as thoroughly as it could have, because this episode is so good. I think the idea of the character, the relationship is so strong that I wish the rest of the season supported it a little bit better.
There probably is a version of this season that is more like KO in season 2, where it's 2 cores, it's longer, it's a little more intentionally meandering, but in there, she essentially plays the Asuka role, and she is the character who has... We see more of the world through her eyes than we did in season... Well, obviously, she wasn't in season 1, but you know what I mean. Like, that she kind of starts playing that role and becomes the de facto center. That I agree. I think that would be really strong.
Yeah, but what is here is still very good.
And actually, while we're here, we haven't mentioned her voice actress yet, because it is a good performance. Do you want to quickly go... Because everyone else is the same, doesn't need a lot of explication, but she is our new voice actor for this season.
Yes, because this is Nagatsuma Judy, whom we heard in Tamako Market, because she plays everybody's favorite hammer girl, Kanna, in Tamako Market. A very different character, of a very different... Like, I would have never been able to recognize the voice, because it's in such a different space. But yeah, it's a great performance, because the character has to... It's a complicated character to play, because the character is playing a character. Right, she very self-consciously is putting on the Sophia performance most of the time. And so this whole kind of the affectations she has to give the character, like she has that like, nee, ha, 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 laugh that she gives. It's a really delicate thing that I think an actor has to do that, where that's not a fully authentic, it's not Ugu. Right? Ugu is that character in Kano, and that is just what that character says. She's not putting anything on. She's not thinking about saying Ugu. I don't know why that person is a person who says Ugu, but that's just what that person says. Nihaha is a thing that Satane has decided is what Sophia Saturn the Seventh says, as in like a very manga anime kind of way. And I think that Nagatsuma Judy does such a good job of communicating that feeling, that there is something underneath that this character is sort of using this persona to protect. And then, of course, as you go on in the season, you see what that is, that she had these feelings for Yuta. She hit this crossroads, and at that crossroads, she chose to run away basically from those feelings because she was scared of them, and chose to keep on being this Maho Maho shoujo as a way to like avoid having to confront those feelings. And she's been kind of hiding or running away from that in some ways ever since. And I think that so much of that comes through in the performance in this really, really fantastic way. Yeah,
she's great. It's, with an ensemble of actors and characters this stacked, it is tough to come in season 2 and distinguish yourself, and she does it with aplomb. So cannot praise that performance enough. And it's part of why I think the season works as well as it does. Wherever you come down on how well it works, it wouldn't have a chance, I think, if you didn't have someone doing Satone really, really well, because it's a tough part.
Yeah.
But it's good stuff.
Yeah. And it's fun to have, because you have her, and then you also have Chento is voiced by Yamaoka Yuri, who was Choi in Tamako Market.
Right.
And she was the Nekomata yokai cat girl in Beyond the Boundary. And it's kind of fun to have this sort of like second generation KyoAni actors, we're not... Unfortunately, we don't have Ono Daisuke in every single show anymore. There was a streak there where he was in like 4 or 5 shows in a row, and I was like, Jesus Christ, Ono Daisuke, you're just in everything that they ever made. But it's nice to have here's some players that are coming in, and you see KyoAni obviously clearly likes these actors because they're very good and are not just the super popular actors of their day, right? They're a little bit more on the fringes, broadly speaking. And it's fun to see them kind of come back and getting to play very different characters.
Yeah. Great stuff. All right. The final 2 episodes, 11 and 12. 11 is, as we talked about earlier, our real climax. 12 is kind of our epilogue. I liked 11 a lot. So this is where we get the fulfillment of the plot line that has been running sort of in the background of this season, where Rikka is trying to open the Dragon of Darkness or whatever it is. This is some weird Chuunibyo shit she's got going on. With his...
Yes, the Dragon of the Darkness Flame, as Hiei from Yu Yu Hakusho would call him.
Yes. What is the weird made-up name that Yuta doesn't want to be called that they keep calling him, Gen? Oh. It's so ridiculous. I cannot... It's got so many syllables.
Yeah, it's like Gurienzis or something. I have no idea.
Okay.
It's very weird.
It's very weird.
It's like, I'm impressed that the voice actors, I have to imagine they had to practice it a lot because it it is a really weird fucking word.
It's very weird. But anyway, we learn in this one that Rikka has been following these instructions that Yuta had like written down years ago, but he forgot that he had written. Honestly, this season gets to a point where it's very Kanon-esque, where it is about this protagonist who has forgotten a bunch of his childhood, and the women are like helping him bring it back, which is what this episode feels like, an episode of Kanon to me in some ways, other than the big dragon.
I can see that.
Other than the big dragon battle at the end. No big dragon battles in Kanon. Maybe it would have been better if it had those. Who knows? But
there was the one girl who fought the invisible demons that were like
true.
The outward expression of her like weird psychokinetic powers. So
okay.
You know, it's not that far off, honestly, in the grand scheme of things.
You're correct. But anyway, so we learned that Rikka has been sneaking out. Rikka has a cold because she is trying to find the third arcade token. Yuta had one, Satone had one, and collecting these in Yuta's old silly letter that he wrote will, bring forth the dragon. And that is what happens at the end here. We have a very sweet exchange between them, and then Satone finally having some catharsis by having her big battle with the dragon and all of that stuff. It's completely ridiculous. It's visually unbelievably spectacular. They went to fucking town on it, and there's some very sweet material in this one too.
Yeah, it visually looks awesome. Like, I do think, like, this is part of where, like, the Chuunibyo action stuff and its connection to sort of, like, the dramatic plot starts to feel like...
Yes.
Weird, like, you know, I understand what they're doing with Satane having to go fight the dragon of the darkness flame. I'm just going to call it that because that's what Yu Hakusho says, and I love that name. That she has to go fight it to get over her feelings with Yuta and all that, like, but it's compared to what season 1 does, where the dramatic impact of Yuta going and saying vanishment this world and opening up the invisible boundary lines and all, like, that stuff is so fucking perfect.
It is.
And here, this feels a lot more like the couple of other shows that came out post Chuunibyo Demo Koigashitai that were trying to sort of like emulate a little bit of what that first season did. And this reminds me more of those shows than season 1, where it's like, I get what you're doing with the powers and all that, but I think it's very hard to actually meaningfully mesh that stuff together, certainly to the level of what season 1 did, because they rely on a lot of kind of clunky exposition where Satane is like shouting, it's like, no, I have to do this because me doing this and me confronting this will allow me to get over this thing, and like, yeah, it feels like we need to kind of say this stuff in dialogue because the dramatic movement of it is not as clear as it really needs to be.
But it looks cool.
It definitely looks cool.
Still better than Beyond the Boundary. In terms of emotional connection to the characters, a lot better than that.
At least Yuta's not trying to put glasses on Rikka, and he's not. I mean, God, I just realized he does have a little sister. He's got 2 little sisters, so it's like, sweet Jesus.
But he doesn't want to fuck either of them. He's a good kid.
Yeah,
clean cut, no incest kid. But man, now I'm imagining, Sean, what if the whole thing in this show was that the eye patch was his fetish object? How much worse would Love Chuunibyo and Other Delusions be if he wanted her to keep that eye patch on purely because he had a fetish for it?
Oh my God. Yeah, I don't want to think about what if the guy who wrote the Beyond the Boundary light novels and has his I Love Girls in Glasses fan website. I don't want to imagine if he was the guy who did the Love Chuunibyo and Other Delusions light novels. I'm glad we don't live in that world.
Somebody listening to this did not listen to the Beyond the Boundary episode and is so confused right now. Oh my God, go listen to that. We're not weirdos. They are. That show is. It's not us. It's them. All right. And then I think we've already talked pretty heavily about episode 12, but we have not talked about the best moment in season 2 of Love, Chuunibyo and Other Delusions. One of the best moments in the history of anime, frankly, which is when Rikka comes to the other girls and tells them about how she wants to... Well, it's actually, I think they're telling it through Satone to Dekomori and Nibutani, but telling them about how Rikka wants to go to a higher level of contract with Yuta, and the 2 girls, Dekomori and Nibutani, are like, higher contract, but they're already lovers. What could that mean? And we get this sudden cutaway to 3 rapid shots, one of 2 birds, one of the birds like puffing out its chest, one of 2 like does in the woods, like deer, fighting over each other.
They're kangaroos.
Oh, they're kangaroos? Okay. Yeah,
yes.
That makes more sense. And then one of a fish jumping, and then a much bigger fish jumping over it. And we come back, and everyone's red in the face going, oh no, oh no, oh no. And I died laughing, rewound it several times. It is a phenomenal moment of genuine associational montage. This is Eisensteinian film theory right here. This is like the moment in Strike, where the 1925 film where you have the workers being put down by the Russian military, cut to a cow being slaughtered in a butcher house, and we call that associational montage. We're doing it here, though, and it's them talking about sex and having animals doing mating patterns. Oh my god, it is such a phenomenal bit of comic timing.
Yeah, it is very funny. I think it's particularly that it's such a weird associative thing that it's where it's like it gets to sex from this like one remove of these like mating patterns, and it's especially because like the first one is very obvious. The other two are like a little bit more obscure feeling of like two kangaroos fight, like males fighting, like competing or whatever, and then like the different size of these fish as they're jumping out of the water and how far they're jumping, is these like different kind of like showing off your stuff as nature mating rituals. It's very weird, and it's very, very funny. Yeah, that is a great gag. I also love, this is another thing that really cracked me up, is Rikka is back at her, or I say her house, I mean, it's Yuta's house, but she's just on fake Google that's called GoGo, and she just types into the box, kiss how a boy feels. Yep. It's like, it's the most innocent Google search I've ever heard of in my entire life. It's like, kiss how the boy feels, and she Googles that and just gets very red-faced, which makes me really curious, like, what even came up? Like, what's like, it's the most like,
you want me to do it right now? Kiss how a boy feels, and that is a very literal translation. It's just kisu otoko no ko no kimochi, and I just love how simple and like unadorned that is. It's great. Okay.
Yes.
Well, the first result is WikiHow saying 12 simple ways to know if he enjoyed a kiss. If he opens his mouth while you kiss, then he's probably feeling intensely passionate. And then it's Quora, WikiHow, Reddit, what's it like to kiss a boy? What a guy is thinking when he kisses you. For me, it's mostly Reddit and things like that. There is an answer from marriage.com. But yeah, I don't know what the Japanese results would be.
Even though like it feels like obviously a website called marriage.com would exist, but I also love the idea of like, man, should I marry this girl? I've been dating her for a couple of years. Let me go to marriage.com and see if that can solve this question. I put in the exact text that she does in Japanese, and I'm getting a lot of like romance psychology websites. A lot of stuff saying like, what was like, it's like otoko no shinni, like shinni meaning like psychology. So it's like, how does like he feel with like, what is the psychology of a boy when he wants to kiss you? So maybe this in Japanese, you maybe get a slightly more relevant searches than you would in English, because the English language website is tainted. The English language internet is tainted in a way that Japanese language internet is not fully.
Yes.
You could like the Japanese internet is more useful than English language internet is, and that's something that's been one of the fun things about doing Japanimation Station, is slowly coming to realize how much like the internet sucks if you speak English, because it, like all these websites like Twitter and shit like that are just absolutely ruined, and Japanese people can still kind of use those because not everybody's an absolute fucking piece of shit online all the time.
Well, and the companies haven't come in and just completely broken everything yet. So yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I'm sorry, American equivalent of Rikka searching that term, you're not going to get much helpful information. Maybe Reddit. Reddit could have some helpful info. People are helpful on Reddit sometimes, but,
Yeah, I'm now just browsing. These are, like, actually very wholesome websites.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, we got an episode to finish here, so just, you can learn how a boy feels when you kiss him after this, okay?
Okay, yeah.
We're on podcast time right now.
Just bookmark up these... Yeah, I'm going to bookmark some of these pages.
All right.
Yeah, so then we get to the end of the episode where we've sort of set this all up, where they're going to be under the bridge. We kind of talk through the story stuff of the scene. But one thing I do want to sort of, really make sure we're pointing out is how fucking good this scene looks and how well directed it is. Like all the stuff of the bridge, because I assume this is supposed to be the same bridge that they're under in episode 10 of season 1, because there's that bridge they walk across to go between the apartment and the school. And so I assume this is all supposed to be that same basic area. And I think it's just cool to see this space that we know really well from that really memorable sequence in episode 10, which was one that you used. I remember the screenshot from there, as the screenshot for the episode of the podcast, because it's just such a great sequence. And having it here at like kind of, it's starting to become sort of dusk. It's late afternoon, so you get that kind of golden color as it's setting. And all the stuff of like the bridge being reflected in the water that you see happening. And obviously you then have this interesting interaction of them going in for the kiss, Rikka starting to cry, Yuta pulling back, and this very kind of delicate interaction between the two, and him then giving his whole speech with a little bit of a montage about it's all the little moments. Which, like, if this scene there were two things that were different. One, if I felt like the rest of the season up to this point better supported the ideas that he was expressing, which we already talked about, like if it was more KO in season 2-esque or something like that. And then if it didn't do the fake out kiss at the end, it would be a perfect scene. It's just that there's some of that stuff around the edges that kind of take the wind out of it a little bit, which is unfortunate because it's such a gorgeous, well-directed animated sequence.
I love this sequence, and I love how it ends with them all running back home to the kittens, and then they work in a full title drop. I always love it when they do this, and I think it's a really good one. You do have to know that the title in Japanese is completely different. It is Chuunibyo Demo Koi ga Shitai, which...
it's like basically, even though I'm a Chuunibyo, I want to love is like what the most literal translation of that would be.
And so they make that basically the final line of the show, which I thought was a really nice, sweet way to tie it together.
Yes, I'm sad that we didn't get Jiraiya from Naruto coming in and giving us a big speech as a narrator, which is what happened Hochiyotsuka, which you had in season 1. They didn't bring him back, which I was a little bit bummed out by, but
I was confused for a second when you started saying that, Sean, of like, you literally were like, I was disappointed Jiraiya from Naruto didn't show up. And I'm like, why would... I mean, I know they have Chuunibyo, but it's never been Naruto Chuunibyo. But hey, season 3 maybe, if they did that.
Yes. Jiraiya is just what comes to mind first, and then I'm like, oh, wait, right, the voice actor, Hochiyotsuka.
Yes.
But whenever he hears a voice, I'm just like, oh, that's the guy from Naruto.
Indeed. No, that is... He's not in this at all. I don't think they do any of the narration, which is kind of an interesting shift. But I do like this as an ending. I like whenever they keep the tradition alive, which kind of comes from avant-garde spaces of doing the hand-drawn versions of the titles at the beginning and end of their season still at KyoAni, which is kind of a cool thing, and I like that here. Because it's written like a kid has written it, and it looks nice.
Yeah. I do also just really like the framing device of the episode, where at the beginning it opens with Kimura the cat, who's sort of acting a little bit weird and hiding away. There is a weird, this didn't jump out to me as much when I was watching the episode the first time, but when I was going back to the screenshots, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but there is like a sort of pairing between Kimura the ant and Rikka in the opening scene, because it's like hiding under the desk and sort of doesn't want to be bothered, and then Rikka's in her bed, and I'm like, is Rikka, is they saying that she's metaphorically pregnant? Like, what's happening here? And that's like a metaphor I don't want to unpack too much. I don't know if that's, I think it's more of like a very light association of like the romance thing. It's just that pregnancy is such a loaded concept that you don't want to dig too deep into that metaphor for fear of what might come out.
Even though I'm Chuunibyo, I still get knocked up. You're mad at me. People can't see this on Zoom. Sean's like, oh God.
Yeah. It's like, it's one of the rare moments where I really wish I was the person who edited the podcast.
Do you want me to get rid of it?
Joke out. No, you have to leave it in because you said it.
Okay.
The world has to know your shame.
All right. We also have the OVA. We shouldn't skip the OVA, which I thought was delightful. Very silly. It's also directed by Ishihara Tatsuya. And this is where Yuta gets a flash drive with pictures of an idol he liked in middle school. And then they kind of have their first fight as a couple over it. I liked this one, and honestly...
This is like...
Sorry, what?
This is like an episode of Chuunibyo, Love Chuunibyo and Other Delusions if it was also an episode of Friends.
Basically, yes.
Or like an American sitcom. Like, not in a bad way or anything. It's just like, it's very funny how American sitcom relationship that whole setup is.
Because it's the kind of thing where they're both sort of in the wrong. I mean, obviously Yuta, if she doesn't want him doing this, should not be doing this, but also he does try to give the flash drive back. Ishiki's a piece of shit and puts it back in his pocket and runs away. At that point, he probably should have gone back to the girls and just said, here, you take it. I didn't want it. He gave it back to me. But instead, he keeps it. He doesn't do anything with it. Rikka goes in, and because she's learned from Toka all his hiding spots, which is a great little detail, finds it, accidentally destroys it. It's good. Honestly, probably if this had been a story integrated into the middle of the season, it might have actually helped the arc a little bit, I think, in some of the ways you're talking about.
Yeah, because it is funny how, the ending of the show is kind of like, we don't have to, we're not like this sort of standard romantic comedy thing, it's like, it's not how we express our feelings. And then immediately the OVA is like the most standard romantic comedy setup between, for characters that are already in a relationship, which is the like, oh, he's got, his dirty magazine or whatever. And it's like, why do you have to, look at that if you've got me? And it's like, also, it's like, but we're also not physically intimate in any way. So it's like, I don't know. It's like, it's getting very confused. It's where I felt really bad for Yuta that he doesn't have any boyfriends anymore, because Ishki's just sort of has disappeared and he only knows girls because he has nobody to take his side.
Yes.
There's nobody there to go like, isn't it kind of unreasonable to be that controlling of him to say that he can't look at like pretty plain images of a celebrity in a fucking bikini? Like, that's a lot to say that this 14-year-old boy can't do that. That's inappropriate for this relationship. And he's got nobody in his life. His dad's fucking living in Jakarta. He's living, he's got his little sister, and he's got all of his friends are 14-year-old girls. He's got nobody to take his back. He needs a bro in his corner to say, it's like, this is kind of weird that you're being this controlling of my man.
I mean, that is where Rikka winds up a little bit, is feeling like she was probably a little too controlling. And I like their reuniting. I like also they do, I feel like, there is the meeting of the minds at the end where they both apologize for what they did that was wrong. There is no recognition of the fact that she did spy on him with a hidden camera.
Yes, that was really weird. I kept on thinking, because I don't think I watched this OVA originally, because I think this came out after obviously the show was done, and so I don't think I ever saw it. Because I kept on expecting there to be a moment that it revealed when he went out there to put his, like, the food out for Rikka and all that stuff, but he's trying to be nice, that then eventually he would, like, walk up to the camera and grab it or something because he noticed that it was there. But the fact that, it never goes addressed that, like, really, her invasion of his privacy was not just sneaking into his room and going through his shit. It was also, spying on him with a hidden camera, which is maybe an even more dramatic invasion of his privacy in some ways. And that kind of goes unaddressed.
It's okay, though. It's the nature of the beast. But no, I like that one. And then one other thing, I am a little bit confused why this flash drive with the bikini pictures is such a big issue. And they bring it up in the episode, but I'm not convinced by their explanation. When we've seen multiple times, he's got pornographic magazines under his bed that Toka just produces at will. Like, there's this amazing sequence in episode 1, I think it is. I took screenshots of it, where she just starts pulling them out of nowhere. There's like 6 or 7 of them that she just keeps on pulling out and throwing on the ground and just like going after them. And she just keeps pulling out more. It's like, this dude's got like, fucking a whole year's worth of Playboys, basically. And Enrica's fully aware of that, has absolutely no issue with it. She saw one and looked at one in season 1. But this, like... They do give an explanation. The explanation is that this is a model that he was, like, in love with in middle school before he knew her, and she's jealous because he's still looking at it. I mean, there is kind of an intentional point that it is illogical, as jealousy often is. But, that's the idea that they give nominally. But yes, he does.
Yes,
he is a horny
I don't
boy.
really buy that explanation, though.
Yeah.
It's like I get what they're saying, but I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
It's okay. All right. We also have the Chuni shorts for this year, the Chuunibyo Heartthrob Light, they call them. They are delightful. Once again, they were delightful in season 1. Yes. I think I preferred the season 1 batch a little bit, but this batch is also very, very good. There's the one where Rikka needs eye drops, but instead of doing that, she just puts on a second eye patch and is bouncing around the room. It's very good. We have another Dekomori versus Nibutani episode that is very funny. We have, I think, probably the funniest My Older Brother 3, where they go camping and he is trying to be he's basically trying to be Guts from Berserk, I feel like, when he's sitting by the campfire with like his sword and he's trying to look cool, and the sister for a second is like, oh, he does kind of look cool, and then he like falls over or something and she's like, actually, never mind.
Yeah, the thing it made me think of, because I just recently rewatched Full Metal Panic, is it kind of reminds me of the main character from that show, Sosuke, who's like this, high school aged boy, but is really a mercenary. I mean, it's basically Setsunef Sei from Double O Gundam. It's the same sort of thing. He was like a child soldier, and in like sitting around the fire, he's like throwing chestnuts or whatever into the fire and trying to be super cool. He's just like, I'm just a mercenary hired for money. Like, I have no intention of fraternizing with you.
And the chestnut explodes and hits him in the head. That's what makes the sister embarrassed. It's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have that one other girl who's in all of the My Older Brother shorts, who is Kuza's friend, who's just like, oh, your big brother's so cool. She's like, is he? Is he? Yeah, that one's very funny. And then you already kind of touched on the last one, which is probably my favorite, which is the summoning in Archangel, which is where you've got Mori Summer and Satane when they were all in middle school, and these two other girls, where there's this one girl in glasses who's trying to like pretend like she's on the Chuunibyo level, and this other girl that just has no idea what the fuck's going on and is honestly kind of freaked out by it. And they're like trying to summon an Archangel, and the wind blows, and she's like, oh, that was him. That was the beating of his wings. Like, what? Like, I don't see anything. No, you don't see with your hands. You must see with your heart. It's like, oh, that must have been him flapping away and going home. It's very good.
It's great. Yeah. I love honestly, if they wanted to just keep on making Chuuni shorts every, few months for the rest of time, I would enjoy them. They're fucking great.
Oh, there is the most Looney Tunes shit that happens in this season, which is in the Kotatsu one, the first short,
yes.
where Kumin is under the Kotatsu blanket or whatever, and Nibutani is trying to like get her out of it, and every time she's trying to grab her, she like zooms in under and pops out somewhere else like she's the fucking Roadrunner. That animation is really, really fucking funny.
It's very Chuck Jones, Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny. Love that. And then the reveal at the end when she finally pulls the Kotatsu off, and it's Dekomori and Rika under there like reading magazines and eating snacks. It's a good one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the shorts are very good, as always.
Yeah, love the shorts. It's like season 1, it's basically an extra episode of short content, kind of like the Lucky Star OVA. And it's very good stuff with the craziest ending theme ever.
Yes.
Adore it. Yeah. I love this show, Sean. I know this season is a little more divisive, but man, we've had a lot of smiles and laughs talking about it. It is still delightful.
Yeah. Like, again, my criticisms of it are not that the show is bad. It's that, like, it's particularly in comparison with the first show, it's a bit of a disappointment. It's a bit of a weaker show, but it's, especially if you're looking at it purely as an episodic comedy and kind of putting some of the bigger things aside, I mean, there's a lot here to love. There's an entire episode that's just about a fucking competitive napping battle, whatever that means. And again, maybe, that doesn't exist. Maybe I just have to make it. Maybe will be my project for next school year, is try to get some students together and say, hey, let's make a napping, let's make the Siesta Association and build this club, because that would be a fun club to be the advisor for.
Absolutely. But next week, we are taking a detour again from Chuunibyo to talk about Myriad Colors Phantom World. This is a show that I know has a more mixed reputation. I am very excited because it's another Tatsuya Ishihara joint. It's written again by Fumihiko Shimo, the guy who did all the key shows. It's got the most crazy stacked voice cast. I'm just looking at the Wikipedia. Hiro Shimono, Sumire Uesaka again, who was Dekomori, Saori Hayami, first time in KyoAni, Maya Uchida again. We got Daisuke Sakaguchi in there, Kikuko Inoue. I'm very excited just to see what this show is, because that is a lot of good people together in one 12-episode show. I want to see it.
Yeah, this is a thing that, like, honestly, Myriad Colors Phantom World is one of the reasons why I wanted to do another part, because I just really need to rewatch that show, because I feel like I just couldn't process it the first time I watched it. I remember it being very weird. There's a couple of moments in that show that are just, like, burned into my memory. I do not know if it's good. I don't know if I will like it watching it again. So I'm not trying to hype it up. But just purely, it's a show I couldn't really wrap my head around, and I really want to watch it again. And so I'm very curious. So we're covering that, all 13 episodes and the OVA next time on Japanimation Station's Kyoto Vacation.
独り立ち物語を紡ぐキャリアを手なんで成功してした意地で何度もここのビルがまるで自由が続けるお願いだ